Hi. So today it's going to be fun. Me and Dylan are going to talk about, in a sense, this will be a two-part series, one about Maine, one about Texas, and this is about where me and Dylan live. And we're going to talk about the indigenous Native Americans that live there. And we're going to together all both learn, and everyone else more about these two places. And I feel it's important for me as an anarchist who believes that the borders are some fake shit that people invented by war. And so I don't feel that we should be only learning about American history because we're in this country that we call America, but we should learn about really the indigenous people of this land. It's just a duty that I think if you live wherever you live, it's my personal feeling. Just like before I lived in Florida and I learned about Florida, and I was talking before with Corey and he was in Saskatchewan and we learned about Saskatchewan because I feel like it's the least that we can do is literally know about the people where we live.
Oh, yeah.
So you can go ahead and say anything you want to say about that. That's my stand.
Oh, no, I think it's really beneficial, and in some ways it could be humbling to see like what was going on in the place you live before you lived there, even before your ancestors lived there. Because a lot of these states, I mean, not even the states, the continent itself, it's packed with history, like dozens and dozens of cultures for people to learn about. It really helps puts things into context, I think.
Right on.
Dylan Violette, CopperViolette in Maine, and Damien Marie AtHope in Texas seek to learn more about the indigenous peoples of the Americas, First Nations / Native Americans, where they both live.
Right on. So that's what the two different videos broken up into, one about Maine and one about, Texas. So go ahead and read this. And this part we'll read both times just because this is about video about both.
Native Americans in Maine, collectively known as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland, Houlton Band of Maliseet Indians, Maliseet / Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq Nation, concentrated in northern Maine, specifically Aroostook County, Passamaquoddy tribe, with communities in Motahkomikuk / Indian Township, and Sipayik / Pleasant Point, and Penobscot Nation, headquartered on Indian Island. Native Americans in Texas. More than 30 organizations claim to represent historic tribes within Texas. However, these groups are unrecognized, meaning they do not meet the minimum criteria for federally recognized tribes and are not state-recognized tribes. There are 3 federally recognized tribes in Texas, each with their own reservation. Alabama Cusata Tribe of Texas. Located near Livingston in the Big Thicket area, the reservation is the oldest in Texas. Kickapoo Traditional Tribe of Texas. Based in Eagle Pass, the tribe maintains strong cultural ties and resides on a reservation along the Rio Grande on the U.S.-Mexico border. Isleta del Sur Pueblo, Tegua. Located in El Paso, this is one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in Texas, established in 1682.
Right on.
Before European settlement, numerous tribes lived across the varied Texas landscape, developing distinct cultures. Southeastern and East Texas, the Caddo built large, permanent villages and elaborate ceremonial mounds, developing extensive trade networks. Other groups included the Atacapa and Wichita peoples. Gulf Coast, tribes like the Karankawa and Coahuiltecans were semi-nomadic, adapting to the coastal environment through fishing, hunting, and gathering. Plains, North and West Texas. Powerful horse-mounted Comanche and Kiowa dominated a vast territory known as the Comancheria, hunting bison and conducting trade and raids. The Apache, including the Lipan and Mescalero groups, were also prominent in West and Central Texas before being pushed out by the Comanche and later by Anglo settlers. West Texas. The Gumano people lived along rivers and practiced farming and extensive trading before eventually joining Apaches. Damien and Dylan live around a 33-hour drive apart.
Right. And now we'll go to the picture for Maine itself.
Okay, so this is where I live. I live way up in northern Maine, in Aroostook County, and
I've been to Maine one time. I went to Caribou, Maine.
Ooh, so how long ago was that?
Oh, that's probably 35 years ago or something. Like a long time ago.
Wow.
Long time ago.
Oh yeah, I know. I used to live in Caribou.
So there's. Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh wow. I know one thing I liked was that was the first time I ever saw red hot dogs, and I was like, wow, these are awesome.
Oh yeah. It's a staple up here. Like, those are really good.
Yeah. So these are the different areas and tribes that are now sort of recognized or whatever. And so people can understand. This is, go ahead and read the different ones.
Okay. Up in the north, mainly Aroostook County, is where the Mi'kmaq are. Further south, past Presque Isle, heading towards Houlton, is Maliseet. Further south, between Houlton and Calais, is where you can find Passamaquoddy. And if you head southwest around Bangor, you can find the Penobscot. And all the way in down east Maine, there's also Passamaquoddy too.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So now we'll go to the rest of the blog. So go ahead and read Maine's prehistory.
Maine's prehistory. AI overview. Maine's prehistory spans at least 13,000 years, beginning with Paleo-Indian caribou hunters inhabiting a post-glacial tundra-like landscape. Indigenous populations evolved through the Archaic, notably the Red Paint people, and Ceramic woodland periods, developing specialized maritime economies. The Wabanaki nations, including the Penobscot and Passamaquoddy, are descendants of these early inhabitants. Key periods and cultures. Paleo-Indian period, approximately 11,000 to 8,000 years ago. Small, mobile bands hunted caribou and likely hunted mammoth/mastodon in a cold, spruce forest environment. They utilized distinctive fluted stone projectile points.
Right, and these points, of course, were all over the Americas, in a sense, showing that it was a dispersal. They always say small, group that had, but it could have been a larger group that all had a shared idea. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting that 11,000 or even as much as 13,000 that there was ice-free areas of Maine. So I had, before really looking deeper into this, I would have not till 10,000. So I already was, sort of surprised.
Archaic period, approximately 8,000 to 3,000 years ago. As the climate warmed and forests grew dense, people adapted to local resources. The maritime archaic culture, or Red Paint people, is known for unique burials containing red ochre.
Right, and as I told you, I believe that sometime in the Archaic period is when you have a new influx of DNA with female X and probably another version of Q.
Yeah, and that would make sense from what I've researched up here. Ceramic/woodland period, approximately 3,000 years ago to CE 1600s. The introduction of pottery, increased reliance on shell middens, and eventually some horticulture in southwestern Maine characterized this era. Wabanaki, people of the Dawnland. By the time of European contact, the region was inhabited by Algonquin-speaking groups, including the Abenaki, Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot.
Right, and those groups are Algonquin-speaking, and Algonquin speakers probably get to the Great Lakes around 3,000 years ago. Also, either towards the end of the Archaic or middle and end, or the woodland period, cDNA also shows up. Male, I'm talking about male cDNA shows up. So, and it's possible also, all these times that different DNA came, they also brought more ideas that were new from the outside.
Environmental changes. Post-glacial landscape. The retreating glacier, circa 12,000 to 13,000 years ago, left behind tundra, large bogs, and a significantly different coastline, eventually forming the modern, deeply indented coast. Climate shifts. The climate transitioned from cold/tundra to a warmer, drier period, roughly 6,000 to 5,000 years ago, with a higher percentage of hardwood forests. Archaeological evidence. Shell middens. Prehistoric waste piles, such as those dating from 200 BCE to CE 1000, have provided significant information about the Gulf of Maine ecosystem and ancient diets. Burial sites. Red ochre graves provide evidence of complex spiritual, social, and cultural practices. Artifacts. Excavations have revealed stone tools, pottery, and animal bones that indicate a hunter-gatherer lifestyle without large, complex architectural constructions. I received this message. I am Mi'kmaq. All these names are European terms, even Mi'kmaq. This was done to separate one people and create false division between each other. These are all Innu, one people separated by dogma. The original governance system was called the Midowin.
So, by the way, that has to do with medicine man, which we'll read at the end. And that comes from the Great Lakes area, maybe Wisconsin, Michigan, whatever. or Canada's side.
Where each tribe would meet up to discuss ways to benefit the other tribe. They were not allowed to make decisions about their own tribe, only others. This way, the goal was to benefit each other and not yourselves. My people are the ones who broke up with the system when we accepted the Norse people's pagan rights and kept in the system. The Mi'kmaq are responsible for breaking apart this old system when we started trading with the Norse and Gaelic people. And we started practicing paganism and warring with everyone around us because we started raiding them to benefit the seafaring tribes. And that's from David Nathan Jerome.
Right. So I wanted to add the things you can see on the stage in a sense. This is what I was talking about, the different DNAs coming in at times. And I think that's important to understand how this stuff moved, because the DNA, in the Americas didn't start there, but it did get there and then it moved around, which is what we were already talking about. And so I wanted to add that. And then I'm also going to add the one for the female DNA just to show the links also, because I think it's important to grasp like the full culture shared, reality, not just how I feel sometimes. Like he was saying, it's a attitude later that everything is so distinctly separated, when that's not really accurate in the terms of what happened. The people were a lot more, in a sense, connected, and it's later ideas. And eventually, of course, groups did diversify, whether or not anything to do with European, but certainly Europeans forced a diversification that was probably a lot harsher. Like they were saying, the groups probably worked in a different way before Europeans added their oppression, because people obviously had to fight for lands in a way they didn't really have to before, and that's going to change how people interact.
Yeah, not only that, the religious missions and conversions to Christianity, that has an impact too.
Oh, absolutely. What would have been over there? And you can see, in a sense, like female DNA N probably is not over there, because it's absent in the area that would be Maine. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But B could be there, and A for sure is there, and C could also be there, female. And then also where the hot spots are, where they came from in Asia. So I wanted to, just address that, because I like people to understand, what's going on. Because if you just say like these numbers, or DNA, that doesn't really help to get a bigger picture of like how they moved around and what's going on. Since all these are Mi'kmaq groups, and most of them in the branches of the group, in a sense, are not even in Maine. Go ahead and read the red writing.
Mi'kmaqi, the Mi'kmaq country, and its districts, with the rest of the Wabanaki Confederacy labeled in light green. And that's in the lower left.
Right. Which also goes outside of Maine.
Yeah.
Both in Canada and in the Americas.
Yeah, it just kind of stretches over into Vermont, Quebec.
Yeah.
Even a little east into New Brunswick.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's that other one? Is that Vermont and New Hampshire? I think, right?
Yeah, it goes from Maine into New Hampshire and then Vermont.
Right.
Yeah, not in the same town, but I've lived in Maine my whole life.
Yeah, I was born in Long Beach, California, and raised till I was like 23 in California. And then I went to Oregon, and then I went back to California after a few years. And then I went from California to North Carolina, and then I went from North Carolina to Texas, and then from Texas, I think then I went back to California, and then from there, I think that's when I went to Florida the first time, and then from Florida to Washington State, and then from Washington State, I think. Where did I go from there? Maybe back to California, and then to Georgia, I think, and then from there to Nevada, maybe? Can't remember exactly. And then I also went to...
So what, have you just lived in every state?
And then I went to Florida again, and I've lived in many states. I lived in Hawaii when I was a kid too for a couple months, and yes, I lived like all over. So there's been but like I told people, in truck driving also, one of the things that happened from me traveling all over is I became less ethnocentric.
Oh yeah, because you got experience with all these different communities.
I experienced so many different communities.
Yeah,
because like when I was from Southern California, I remember when I first was truck driving, and they took me, I went to Texas, and I seen black people with cowboy hats and like just getting down to cowboy music. I openly laughed because that was the funniest shit I had ever seen in my life. Because from where I was from, I didn't really see white people that listened to country country music. So and never seen black people where I was from listen to rap or like, soul or something to R&B, like just to see that and the guy, because I laughed out loud, he heard, and he came up and he goes, "You're not from here." I'm like, "I'm from California, man, Southern California."
No, that's like a big culture shock.
And he goes, "It must be pretty weird to see that, huh? Black person liking country." I go, "Funniest shit I've ever seen in my life. I didn't know there was such a thing." I mean, I was like, literally, it blew my mind, like. But so I was so culturally encapsulated to where everything blew my mind, because where I was from, I had not experienced a lot of the world in the way that other people experience it, and it just like, what? And so it helped change me really to become. That's probably on the path of me becoming an anarchist, was really starting to see, wait a minute, hey, everybody really is a lot different. There's also a lot of similarities, but man, there's a lot of difference too. Like, holy shit. But it was good for me because, I mean, it's hard when you're in culturally. That's also why I think it's important for people to learn about other stuff, and like you are, learn about cultures and things that are not you, because we do get really like locked into like one way of thinking. And
yeah, absolutely.
So I find it amazing even more for me that people can have lived like in one place and never been anywhere else, and yet not be culturally encapsulated that much. That to me is amazing, because boy, I had a hard time. Very hard. But now that I've I've been to every single state in the United States and 4 provinces of Canada, and I've been to Mexico more than once. So that really it broadened me. It's like, it's definitely. I could go on and on, but I don't want to make the whole video on my experiences. But yeah, absolutely, Dylan. There's a lot. I would have to think about all the different things, but there's a lot.
No, I just find that completely interesting, and like that's like so cool to me. Like, you could have these different regions of the U.S. and like each of those regions has its own culture, but within that culture there are all these like dozens and dozens of subcultures. Like towns can have their own slang, their own terms for things.
In fact, now that you bring this up, and I do think it is beneficial, and I think that we'll do a video. I want to do the DNA stuff first, I think, but we'll do a video relatively soon so people know. Where I'll do a video where we just talk about this. No thing. I'll just talk about. We'll call it something like learning to become not culturally capsulated or something, because that's really what happened. How I became a broader person. So I think it would be kind of a fun, cool video, and we can talk about all kinds of stuff that I learned and experienced. So certainly for all those,
I'd be interested in doing that one.
Yeah, so I think that'd be fun. Then you can ask questions. Whatever. So getting back to this,
okay,
go ahead and read about the indigenous tribes.
Okay, the 8 districts of Mi'kmaq: light purple, Gespegewaki; dark purple, Siknik; yellow, Epek Witkak Piktuk; dark green, Sipkni Katik; light red, Kespuk Witik; tan, Eskikewakik; orange, Unamaki, the capital district of Mi'kmaq; dark red, Katak; light green, the other national territories of the Wabanaki Confederacy; dark gray, the southern territories of the Dawnland region; light gray, Turtle Island, North America.
Right. And so that's relating to this picture right here and all what they were talking about. So go ahead and read about the Mi'kmaq.
The Mi'kmaq, singular, Mi'kmaq, also Lenape and formerly Mi'kmaq, are an indigenous group of people of the northeastern woodlands, native to the areas of Canada's Atlantic provinces, primarily Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, and the Gaspe Peninsula of Quebec, as well as Native Americans in the northeastern region of Maine. The traditional national territory of the Mi'kmaq is named Mi'kmaqi, or Mi'kmaqi. It is one of the 5 confederated Wabanaki, or Dawnland, countries. As of 2023, there are 66,748 Mi'kmaq people in the region. This includes 25,182 members in the more recently formed Kalapu First Nation in Newfoundland. According to the Canadian 2021 census, 9,245 people claim to speak Mi'kmaq, an Eastern Algonquin language. Once written in Mi'kmaq hieroglyphic writing, it is now written written using most letters of the Latin alphabet. The Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy nations signed a series of treaties known as the Peace and Friendship Treaties with the British Crown throughout the 18th century. The first was signed in 1725 and the last in 1779. The Mi'kmaq maintain that they did not cede or give up their land title to Mi'kmaqi or other rights through these peace and friendship treaties. The landmark 1999 Supreme Court of Canada decision in R.V. Marshall upheld the 1752 Peace and Friendship Treaty, which promised Indigenous peoples the right to hunt and fish their lands and establish trade. The Mi'kmaq Grand Council is the official authority that engages in consultation with the Canadian federal government and the provincial government of Nova Scotia, as established by the historic August 30th, 2010 agreement with the Mi'kmaq Nation, resulting from the Mi'kmaq Nova Scotia Canada Tripartite Forum.
Right, and I'm not totally sure about how many of the treaties Canada broke. I know that America pretty much broke every treaty it ever signed, but I'm sure Canada is not too far behind being absolutely horrid to Indigenous peoples. Although I would say at least they acknowledge they have a right, which is something that America still, I don't know, struggles with, or, you know, even like currently in our government doesn't even give a fuck about.
No, and last I checked, the amount of broken treaties for Canada, it's still a lot. Like, as soon as the British got involved in the Northeast and spread westward, it follows a similar trajectory to the British in the South and like in New England in the formation of the United States. It's
right.
It's
one interesting thing about that is that it's not limited to British. It's not like British do this where it go, because they did do a lot of that wherever they went. But what I want to go to this point is Indigenous peoples were impressed in Indonesia by the Indonesian government. In Sami lands from, you know, the areas near, you know, the Swedish and, you know, the Norwegian, those people also did Indian-like schools. And also the same thing in Indonesia. They take their culture, they cut their hair, they make them, you know, not do their language and their religion. I mean, you're like, what the fuck? It's just, but you start to see the Russians did it, you know, worse actually than everybody else, because the Russians don't even give Indigenous people lands or even knowledge they exist, right? They're literally fucked, which is also why I think we'll do a video on that too, about the Russian, which I talked before in a different video about the Russian conquest of the North, which is horrid. And even to this day, that Putin is still trying to give away native land for other people. Just it's not even like past. And even worse than this, it's even worse than this. There's soldiers that are forced to do, or could be choose to do, go from Sami lands that are in Russian areas and fight in Ukraine and still receive bigotry from other Russian soldiers calling them reindeer herders. So
are they still calling them Laplanders?
Well, yeah, that also, which is also bullcrap. But so, yeah, and then also that's not even in Japan. So the Japanese are, in a sense, a clan that came from Korea over and took over the islands over the Jom people and the Hanyu people of the north, and did similar things: take away their culture, take away their religion, their language, their, you know, identity. So that's what all I was trying to say is, I'm not saying, oh, well, the British weren't that bad. I'm just trying to say is, no, this is a common theme of colonialism and imperialism, to literally not just take the land, but try to rob the people of their literal identity, to then, you know, and then later say, well, this is our land, fuck you, right? Like Americans, go home, you know, some white dude that has no cultural heritage is like, yeah, go home. Other people that don't look white,
go home. Like, you're the ones on my home.
Well, and also then they'll say, oh, people that are, you know, dark skin are now invading, you know, Europe. Oh, I'm sorry, Europe invaded the whole world, and now you're complaining because some of those people are going to Europe?
Oh yeah, like when you look at the map at just how many territories like Britain itself claimed, like, it's crazy. Yeah, it's like pretty much the whole world. And then complains about people going to Britain for British only. You're like, really? Do you say that about America and Australia and every other fucking New Zealand, every other fucking place you went? You know, Africa, like every other place you went? Yeah. Anyways, let's keep going. This collaborative agreement, which includes all the First Nations within the province of Nova Scotia, was the first in Canadian history. Historically, the Sante Mawiomi, or Grand Council, which was made up of distinct councils and chiefs, or Sakamak, of Mi'kmaq, was the traditional senior level of government for the Mi'kmaq people. In 1876, the 1876 Indian Act disrupted that authority by requiring First Nations to establish representative elected governments along the Canadian model and attempting to limit the council's role in spiritual guidance. The Mi'kmaq, singular Mi'kmaq, comes from the word Mi'kmaq, meaning my friends. There exist various spelling conventions resulting in forms like Mi'kmaq, singular Mi'kmaq, and Mi'kmaq, singular Mi'kmaq. The singular form, Mi'kmaq, is also used as the adjectival form, as seen in Mi'kmaq Nation. Alternatively, Mi'kmaq use the terms Lenuuk, plural Lenuuk, meaning the people, to describe themselves.
By the way, there's a lot of tribes in the Americas that have names for their tribe that mean like the people or the original people or the real people, or it's interesting, which also tells me there's probably a cultural relation to why they're doing that. Too many of them say that, like, or like even in the Ket, which is related to Nadane over in Lake Bacall, or actually the river that's close to there, but Yanasi River or Yanasea, whatever. Anyways, that those people that are related to the Nadane speakers, which include the Apache we talked about that's in Texas, they have the name for their Ket people is basically the men or the people, which is interesting because isn't that what they're saying that the name means there all the way in Maine? And so, and then like I told you, several groups all along the way back to the northwest, and then all the way over into Siberia are similarly using the terms often that relate to like the real people or whatever. So it's interesting. I was doing a thing trying to research. I'm getting more closer to being done. My thing of doing, how many groups have chieftains or chiefs or big men or some sort of a leadership, or thing in the Americas. And I went down from Alaska all the way down to California and then started going across and did all the Algonquin languages because I feel that's a big thing that really pushed Northwest ideas all the way to the east. And then they filtered down, like down to Florida from the Northeast down and also into the plains and everything. Like even like what I wanted to do a thing with you too later, where we do the indigenous languages and like where they come from, like their origins, because like a lot of the Plains language family comes from Ohio, the Ohio River Valley. So I think that helps you understand like how some of these ideas end up coming, and they come from like the mound builders and stuff. That why they, even though that they changed their culture later, maybe originally that these. So it helps to see like the Algonquin being from almost California or like Northern California or Oregon or Washington, somewhere in between there or around there, helps to understand like how ideas from one place like all the way to thousands of miles different could end up all over the place, which is what I think is important to grasp, because my feeling is that a lot of people don't grasp that culture or as things as a cultural package moved a lot more than I feel like people realize or grasp. I feel like a lot of people feel like every little tribe, like just in its own in situ area, just came up with all the ideas on their own, which I know probably a lot of indigenous people also would like to feel that they come right out of the ground for thousands of years, but that's not really an accurate thing.
I don't think it is either.
So and I know that everybody, it's like I'd like to think that I was originally born in California, or just like the people that I understand Americanism, like these white people that are Europeans, and who knows? Like my family, it's only been like I think 3 or 4 generations, so that's not that long. But if you ask me, without knowing that in a sense, I would feel like I've always been here, or always have been in California, which I'm not living now. But I can get how that is a natural feeling to ownership or like whatever. So I get the bigot's opinion, but it's wrong. And I also can see where an indigenous person, where people are trying to take your stuff, would feel like, well, this is mine, and then also want to feel like I've always been here.
Yeah.
And so, or all the ideas that I have are nothing like any other indigenous person. When that's not, if you start reading all the different indigenous beliefs, you start realizing, Yeah, you have a lot in common.
Yeah,
It couldn't
and
possibly have not been somehow shared.
and if anything, if modern research is anything to go on, which I think it is, it's showing that not just North America but the Americas, they're not the cultural groups weren't isolated for most of their histories. There was as much population movement in the Americas themselves as there was in Eurasia or Africa. People were always moving around. People were trading long distances.
Yep, I totally agree. And that's why I always tell people, to me, religion is best understood as a cultural product that moved in cultural migrations.
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't mean that Graham Hancock's, great white race that went and taught everyone, or even if he doesn't feel they're a white race now, because it sure seems like his earlier books were leading at that. But even if he doesn't say that, he believes that something close to Atlantis or whatever, thousands of years in the Ice Age culture went and taught everybody, or the remnants of that culture. Wrong. Literally, we're going to do it later a show on explaining DNA better, and also eventually, like I said, languages, because I really want people to grasp and understand. My goal is a teacher. I don't try to get gotcha things or show facts to prove something, how great I am, or whatever. I want people to truly have the power of knowledge, to understand for themselves, to grasp these concepts for themselves, so they can feel empowered. Not so Damien can, but you can feel empowered because you understand and you know. And then also, I really hope that I inspire people to go research more, look beyond what I say, take everything I do and use it as a stepping place to where you can then climb up higher than me and see more than me. I mean, what I'm saying? My goal is not to be, I'm the end all end and great or anything. I want people to, learn. My goal is to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And I think that we all should be learners and teachers. We learn stuff and then teach, sometimes at the same time.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's a worthwhile goal. I think it's definitely a worthwhile goal, because if you look back on the history of not just archaeology or genetics or a lot of the stuff that Damien and I talk about, it's like a process of building blocks, almost like the Lego analogy that Damien's used before. It's a process of building on the research that previous generations of academics or enthusiasts have put together.
Absolutely.
So
I'm saying that's more my
lifelong
goal than
process.
somehow I become, seen as great. I hope that everybody feels empowered and learns and realizes that. And I agree with you. I've certainly go and look at things of DNA scientists or archaeologists or ethnographers or linguistics people or mythological people or historians. I look at the stuff and I then stand on what they're doing and then conceive other stuff as well. And I think that's education should be, that we're all working toward the common goal of greater knowledge.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right on.
On August 30th, 2010, the Mi'kmaq Nation and the Nova Scotia provincial government reached an historic agreement, affirming that the Mi'kmaq Grand Council was the official consultative authority that engages with the Canadian federal government and the provincial government of Nova Scotia. The Mi'kmaq Nova Scotia Canada Tripartite Forum preceded the agreement. On August 2010, the August 2010 agreement is the first such collaborative agreement in Canadian history. It includes representation for all the First Nations within the entire province of Nova Scotia. Historically, the Sainte Maori, or Grand Council, which was made up of chiefs of the district councils of Mi'kmaq, was a traditional senior level of government for the Mi'kmaq people.
Right, so right there it shows that they have chiefs,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that I told you we're going to have a video, or I'm going to make a blog about chiefs and power structures in indigenous Americas.
The 1876 Indian Act disrupted that authority by requiring First Nations to establish representative elected governments and attempting to limit the council's role of spiritual guidance. In addition to the district councils, the Mi'kmaq have been traditionally governed by a Grand Council, or Sante Mabiomi. The Grand
By
Council.
the way, pause before you go on. And you're going to learn when we do the things on the other indigenous tribes, especially because the last thing I was doing was all the different Algonquin ones. They often, especially in the Northeast, they seem to have chiefs, sometimes chieftains, sometimes not, sometimes chiefs and confederacies, but often all three of them almost have councils.
The Grand Council was composed of Keptinak, captains in English, who were the district chiefs. There were also elders, the Putus, wampum belt readers, and historians, who also dealt with the treaties with the non-natives and other native tribes, the Women's Council, and the Grand Chief. The Grand Chief was a title given to one of the district chiefs, who was usually from the Mi'kmaq district of Unamaki or Cape Breton Island. This title
I
was
wonder if when they say Grand Chief, if it's like a paramount chieftain, which is almost like a king type of a chieftain, or they mean something else. Sometimes, words are how English words we're trying to put on, the ideas, but sometimes also the ideas are mirroring what our words would be.
This title was hereditary within a clan and usually passed on to the Grand Chief's eldest son.
And see, doesn't that sound like the hereditary part, and that it only goes to the son, sounds a lot like the other chieftain stuff you're. By the way, I know you haven't read the blog, so you're going to see that's a common theme, this hereditary.
Oh no, I haven't read the entire blog, especially the Texas part, but I have gone through it and checked out different sections.
Well, no, I meant on the one I haven't done yet, where I explain all the different chiefs and how they socially organize from Alaska down to California, and then every branch of Algonquin. I go through every single one, and I'm going to explain it. So I know that when you hear it multiple times, then it starts going, oh.
I know, yeah, I really want to check that one out.
Yeah.
On June 24th, 1610, Grand Chief Membertal converted to Catholicism and was baptized. He concluded an alliance with the French Jesuits. The Mi'kmaq, as trading allies of the French, were amenable to limited French settlement in their midst.
Right, and one of the things that's different when they make a distinction about the French and the French mainly sent or allowed the movement of the men that were French to come and do trading, and it was a limited thing, and they often tried to almost either mirror in some way native ways and learn the native language, and sometimes, because it was just men, would take native wives and try to become part of the culture or even live in similar housing or stuff. That is not what the British did. The British came often with women and with cattle and animals that were not indigenous, built houses in ways that had nothing to do with indigenous, didn't really prefer to even learn native languages, wanted natives to learn English. So, I mean, there's and wanted land, because they're going to do, instead of the French kind of saying, oh, we'll just live it the same way, you fish, we'll fish, you hunt, we'll hunt, where the English came and said, we're going to build farms and we're going to grow our crops and we're going to do our animals. And, so I'm just making a comment that I already know this, even though it's not in the blog, that there's a mass difference between how the French impact and native cultures was compared to British.
Oh yeah, and I'll just point out that I'm French. My ancestors are all French. We can trace our ancestry here all the way back to the 1600s, 1700s, and it's not just Maine or the Canadian Maritimes that you see this pattern with the French being trading allies. You can find that same pattern all along the St. Lawrence heading into the Great Lakes, and even my ancestors' settlement style was completely different. You don't find these huge like towns and settlements. Like the largest that you'll find back during the colonial era is along the St. Lawrence in places like Tadoussac or Gatineau, or like especially Montreal and Quebec City. Like aside from that, it's mostly just like little forts, little trading outposts, and a lot of it is just like mirroring and mimicking what the local tribes are doing and trying to be allies as much as possible. Completely different with British.
Oh, completely different. That's why I want to make that distinction, that even though they're both European, that they did not interact with indigenous people or the land in any similar way.
Gabriel Siddleboy, 1874 through 1964, a respected Mi'kmaq religious leader and traditional Grand Chief of the Council, was elected as the Council's Grand Chief in 1918. Repeatedly re-elected, he held this position for the rest of his life. In 1927, Grand Chief Siddleboy was charged by Nova Scotia with hunting muskrat pelts out of season. He was the first to use the rights defined in the Treaty of 1752 in his court defense. He lost his case. In 1985, the Supreme Court of Canada finally recognized the 1752 treaty rights for indigenous hunting and fishing in their ruling on R.V. Simon.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, Fuck, it really took that long for you to recognize that? On the 50th anniversary of Siliboy's death, the Grand Council asked the Nova Scotia government for a pardon for the late Grand Chief. Premier Stephen McNeill granted the posthumous pardon in 2017.
Which it still took a shit ton longer. Like, what the hell?
Oh, yeah, as a little side note, I did ask a little bit ago just how many treaties Canada has broken with tribes.
I don't know.
Well, it's an AI overview. I'd have to do more in-depth research on this, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's saying there's no officially stated number, but it's violated most of them, and it's giving some references to like the cows and plows treaties. Canada failed to provide promised livestock, farm tools, and agricultural assistance to tribes. Treaties promised certain land sizes, which were violated time and time again. And like we're seeing, like here, like hunting rights are like hunting and fishing rights that you find in certain treaties. Those were violated time and time again. So
yeah, like I said, because of being American, I've always obviously done a lot more research into what America's violated. But yeah, I think it is still really important, since you and me in general don't limit ourselves to borders. We'd like to learn history all over. And Canada's just like right here. So it's, next to us. I think it's important.
Oh, yeah, and it's especially relevant to me because I'm really close to Canada, like a hop, skip, and a jump.
Right. You can get there quicker than you can get to where I am.
Oh, yeah. Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, John James Grant McNeill, and the Justice Minister, Diana Whelan, pardoned Siliboy issued a formal apology. It was the second posthumous pardon in Nova Scotia's history. His grandson, Andrew Denny, now the Grand Captain of the Council, said that his grandfather had commanded respect. Young people who were about to get married would go and ask for his blessing. At the Chapel Island mission, boats would stop if he was crossing. Traditionally, the Grand Council met on a small island, Miʻkmaq, on the Brest-Or Lake in Cape Breton. In the early 21st century, this site is now within the reserve known as Chapel Island, or Passamaquoddy. The Grand Council continues to meet in Miʻkmaq to discuss current issues within the Mi'kmaq Nation. Motahkomikuk, Newfoundland, was historically defined as part of Unamaqik territory. Later, the large island was organized as a separate district in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. The Mi'kmaq language was written using Mi'kmaq hieroglyphic writing, using a hieroglyphic system created in 1677 by French Catholic missionary Christian Leclerc. Leclerc noted that the Mi'kmaq children were memorizing prayers utilizing the counting of marks, but did not claim to have incorporated any of this system into the hieroglyphs he created. It is likely that this pre-Leclerc writing system was part of a writing tradition by the Mi'kmaq similar to that observed in 1651 amongst the eastern Abenaki of Maine. Today, it is written mainly using letters of the Latin alphabet. At the Kejimkujik National Park and National Historic Site, petroglyphs of lifeways of the Mi'kmaq, including written hieroglyphics, human figures, Mi'kmaq houses and lodges, decorations including crosses, sailing vessels, and animals etched into slate rocks. These are attributed to the Mi'kmaq, who have continuously inhabited area since prehistoric times. Petroglyphs date from the late prehistoric period through the 19th century. Jerry Lonecloud, 1854 through 1930, Mi'kmaq, is considered the ethnographer of the Mi'kmaq Nation. In 1912, he transcribed some of the Kejimkujik petroglyphs and donated his works to the Nova Scotia Museum. He is credited with the first Mi'kmaq memoir, which was recorded from his oral history in the 1920s. In southwestern Nova Scotia, there is archaeological evidence that traces traditional land use and resources to at least 4,000 years. In Kejimkujik National Park and National Historic Site, there are canoe routes that have been used for thousands of years by indigenous people traveling from the Bay of Fundy to the Atlantic Ocean. Research published in 1871 showed that some Mi'kmaq believed they had emigrated from the west and then lived alongside the Quechech. According to Mi'kmaq traditions recorded by S.T. Rand, the Quechech were the original inhabitants of the land. The two tribes engaged in a war that lasted many years and involved the slaughter of men, women, and children and torture of captives, and the eventual displacement of the Quechech by the victorious Mi'kmaq. In his Memorial University master's thesis, Mi'kmaq elder Roger Lewis investigated how pre-contact Mi'kmaq populations had a reciprocal relationship with the environment that was reflected in subsistence fishing, hunting and gathering, as well as in settlement locations. Lewis, who has held the position of ethnology curator at the Nova Scotia Museum in Halifax since 2007, focused his master's research specifically on pre-contact fish weirs in southwestern Nova Scotia. In the chapter, Late Prehistory of the East Coast, in the Smithsonian's 1978 Handbook of North American Indians, archaeologist Dean Snow says that the fairly deep linguistic split between the Mi'kmaq and the eastern Algonquins to the southwest suggests the Mi'kmaq developed an independent prehistoric cultural sequence in their territory. It emphasized maritime orientation, as the area had relatively few major river systems. In the chapter Early Indian-European Contact, in the 1978 handbook, ethnologist T.J. Bresser described how pre-contact small semi-nomadic bands of a few patrilinearly related families who lived in a climate unfavorable for agriculture has subsisted on fishing and hunting. Developed leadership did not extend beyond hunting parties. In the same 1978 handbook, anthropologist Philip Bach described the annual cycle of seasonal movement pre-contact Mi'kmaq. Bach wrote that the Mi'kmaq had lived in dispersed interior winter camps in larger coastal communities during the summer. The spawning runs of March began their movement to converge on smelt spawning streams. The next harvested spawning herring gathered waterfowl eggs and hunted geese. By May, the seashore offered abundant cod and shellfish, and coastal breezes brought relief from the biting black flies, deer flies, midges, and mosquitoes of the interior. Autumn frost killed the biting insects during the September harvest of spawning American eels. Smaller groups would disperse into the interior, where they hunted moose and caribou. The most important animal hunted by the Mi'kmaq was the moose, which was used in every part: the meat for food, the skin for clothing, tendons and sinew for cordage, and bones for carving and tools. Other animals hunted/trapped included deer, bear, rabbit, beaver, porcupine. Brazier described the first contact between the Mi'kmaq and early European fishermen. These fishermen salted their catch at sea and sailed directly home with it, but they set up camps ashore as early as 1520 for dry curing cod. During the second half of the century, dry curing became the preferred preservation method. Brazier said that trading furs for European trade goods had changed Mi'kmaq social perspectives. Desire for trade goods encouraged the men to devote a larger portion of the year away from the coast, trapping in the interior. Trapping non-migratory animals, such as beaver, increased awareness of territoriality. Trader preferences for good harbors resulted in greater numbers of Mi'kmaq gathering in fewer summer rendezvous locations. This, in turn, encouraged their establishing larger bands, led by the ablest trade negotiators. According to the Nova Scotia Museum, bear teeth and claws were used as decoration and in regalia. The women used porcupine quills to create decorative beadwork on clothes, moccasins, and accessories. The weapon used most for hunting was the bow and arrow. The Mi'kmaq made their bows from maple. They ate fish of all kinds, such as salmon, sturgeon, lobster, squid, shellfish, and eels, as well as seabirds and their eggs. They hunted marine mammals such as porpoises, whales, walrus, and seals. Mi'kmaq territory was the first portion of North America that Europeans exploited at length for resource extraction. Reports by John Cabot, Jacques Cartier, and Portuguese explorers about conditions there encouraged visits by Portuguese, Spanish, Basque, French, and English fishermen and whalers beginning in the 16th century. European fishing camps traded with Mi'kmaq fishermen, and trading rapidly expanded to include furs, according to Thomas B. Costain, 1885 to 1965, a journalist who wrote historical novels. By 1578, some 350 European ships were operating around the St. Lawrence estuary. Most were independent fishermen, but increasing numbers were exploring the fur trade. Some Mi'kmaq people practice Catholic faith, while some only practice traditional Mi'kmaq beliefs. However, many have adopted both because of the compatibility between both systems. The Mi'kmaq people had very little in the way of physical recording and storytelling. Petroglyphs, while used, are believed to have been rare. In addition, it is not believed that pre-contact Mi'kmaq had any form of written language. As such, almost all of Mi'kmaq traditions were passed down orally, primarily via storytelling. There were traditionally three levels of oral traditions: religious myths, legends, and folklore. This includes Mi'kmaq creation stories and myths, which account for the organization of the world and society. For instance, how men and women were created and why they are different from one another. The most well-known Mi'kmaq myth is that of Glooskap. Good storytellers are highly prized by the Mi'kmaq, as they provide important teachings that shape who a person grows to be and are sources of great entertainment. One myth explains that the Mi'kmaq once believed that evil and wickedness among men is what causes them to kill each other. This causes great sorrow to the creator sun god, who weeps tears that become rain sufficient to trigger a deluge. The people attempt to survive the flood by traveling bark canoes, but only a single old man and woman survive to populate the earth. One spiritual capital of the Mi'kmaq nation is Unamaki, the gathering place of the Mi'kmaq Grand Council, or Sante Mawiomi Chapel Island in Brastoor Lake of Nova Scotia. The island is also the site of the St. Anne Mission, an important pilgrimage site for the Mi'kmaq. The island has been declared a historic site.
Right. And the Mi'kmaq people, crazy story.
The Mi'kmaq people do not explain how the Great Spirit came into existence, only that Creator is responsible for everything being where it is today. Creator made everything. Kisuluk, Gisuluk, is the one who made everything. Sometimes Kisu Kisuuk is referred to as Kji Niskem, G Niskam, or the Great Spirit. Neither word implies gender, because it is not important whether the Great Spirit is a he or a she. Mi'kmaq culture, oral tradition, Kisuluk, Nakuset, the creation of Wisit Kamut, the creation of Kluskap, the coming of Nukumi, the coming of Netawansum, the coming of Nikana Petike, Kewesuk, Kluskap's wife, Kluskap's departure, and final teachings. AI overview. The Mi'kmaq creation story, a central part of their oral tradition, describes creation unfolding in 7 levels, guided by the giver of life, Gisuk, and emphasizing respect for all living things. The narrative explains the origins of the natural world and the first Mi'kmaq people, centered around the first human, Gluskap. The 7 levels of creation. The story, as passed down by elders like Stephen Augustine, outlines the following stages. Level 1, the giver of life, Gisug. Gisug, who is neither male nor female, creates everything in the world, including the sky, clouds, sun, moon, and earth. Level 2, grandfather sun, Akusat. The sun is created and provides life and warmth, connecting the spirit world to the physical world. It is seen as a representation of ancestors looking after the level 3.
Pause 1 second. The reason the sun or anything could be a ancestor, and the fact of it being an ancestor is a totemistic concept, but totemism emerges out of animism, just like shamanism doesn't come from totemism, even though it's older, it comes from animism. They both do. It's like they're dual children, just different times. Later, they're merged together. So this right here tells you if you have an animistic concept, that means anything can or does have a spirit, including humans, but also could be rocks and trees or animals or natural weather events or stars or sun or Milky Way or weather or whatever. So the sun having a spirit and then seen as a representation of an ancestor can make sense to a totemistic, animistic mindset.
And something I'll point out too is with this first human character called Gluskap. This character isn't only seen in the Mi'kmaq. There are variations in the spelling, notably instead of a G, it's a K, but you can find the same or like almost similar character heading west also.
And to me, it likely probably came from the west and went east. But yes.
Level 3, Mother Earth, Usit Kam. The earth is the foundation for all existence and provides everything needed for survival, including plants, animals, and water. Gluskap gives thanks to Mother Earth for her nourishment. Level 4, Gluskap or Kluskap. The first man is created when a bolt of lightning strikes the earth. He initially gains his 7 sacred parts, eyes, ears, nostrils, mouth, and then the ability to move after subsequent lightning strikes. He learns how to survive and form relationships with nature. Level 5, Grandmother. Nukumi, the first family member to join Gluskap. She is made from a dew-covered rock heated by the sun. She embodies wisdom and teaches Gluskap how to survive, leading to the first agreement with an animal, the marten, and the creation of the sacred fire. Level 6, Nephew. Metawansum, a strong young man. The nephew is created from the foam of the ocean and sweetgrass, bringing strength, vision, and hunting skills. He and Gluskap make an agreement with fish to provide sustenance. Level 7, Mother. Nikana Te Kewis. Gluskap's mother appears from a leaf that fell to the ground and collected dew. She brings love, understanding, and the colors of the world, teaching the importance of sharing and caring for one another. Her arrival is celebrated with a meal of berries, nuts, and roots. Ultimately, sparks from the Great Spirit Fire create the 7 original Mi'kmaq families, who take their fire in the 7 directions, forming the basis of the Mi'kmaq nation and their connection to the ancestral lands in eastern Canada. The story emphasizes core values such as gratitude, responsibility, community, and the interconnectedness of all living things. History of Maine. During the roughly 13,000 years since people first moved into Maine, there have been dramatic environmental changes, some within the last few thousand years. These environmental changes include relative sea level rise, moderate climate change, and related response by the forest and land plant company, and change in water temperatures and tidal range within the Gulf of Maine, with associated changes in fish, bird, and marine mammal populations. For 1,000 years after people arrived, about 13,000 years ago, Maine was subarctic in character, at least on the land. Northern Maine and higher elevations were grassy tundra, with open spruce forest, parkland, in central Maine, and dense spruce conifer forest in southernmost Maine and southern New England. This environmental gradient is similar to that of Labrador today, and it supported large migratory caribou herds. We don't know much about the nature of the Maine coast, but oysters and clams were present in at least localized areas by 10,000 to 9,000 years ago. The first people to inhabit Maine, called Paleo-Indians by archaeologists, moved into New England from west to the Hudson River about 13,000 calendar years ago. The terrestrial environment in Maine at that time was analogous to Labrador today. Patches of tundra and grassland, isolated spruce trees, and open spruce forests with small remnant patches of ice cap in the northern Maine mountains. The Laurentide ice sheets had pulled back to the north of what is now the St. Lawrence River. The St. Lawrence Valley and the Champlain Lake basins were a cold subarctic sea full of walrus, seals, whales, and fish. We don't know much about conditions on the Maine coast because it was miles offshore compared to today. That 13,000-year-old coast is now marked by the 200-foot depth contour, approximately, or 33 fathoms underwater.
Which is a lot.
Oh yeah, that's pretty deep.
Holy shit.
Based on what were then inland archaeological sites, the ones archaeologists have come across today above current sea level, the Paleo-Indians made part of their living by hunting caribou and perhaps the last of the mammoth and mastodon, and moving over vast areas of land on foot. Their small campsites, marked by distinctive stone tools, are spread across New England and the maritime provinces. We trace their movements in part by the distance between stone tool quarries and where stone tools were dropped on sites, sometimes up to 500 kilometers. Maybe the Paleo-Indians had a coastal seasonal economy based on shellfish and fish, but we don't know. Beginning around 11,000 years ago, the climate warmed over a few millennia to a condition by 8,000 years ago, a bit warmer and drier than we have experienced in Maine over the last century or two. Forest cover was dense and had changed dramatically by 7,000 to 6,000 years ago, with a higher percentage of hardwoods and nut-bearing trees than today, especially in southern Maine. It was perhaps more like the forest of Massachusetts or Connecticut than at the time Europeans arrived. The warmer and drier climate resulted, in part, in lower freshwater levels in Maine and New England lakes, sometimes by a few feet, around 6,000 to 5,000 years ago. Lower water flow in streams and rivers was also probable. Although there has been minor variation, it seems as if the general trend over the last few millennia, roughly the last 3,000 years, has been toward slightly cooler and wetter overall conditions until the last 50 years. The regional climate in general warmed up rapidly after 11,000 years ago. Various tree species continue to move northward as their seeds were spread in various ways, and Maine was covered by a dense, hardwood-dominated mixed forest. The coastal waters warmed in parallel with the forested interior. Small Native American seasonal villages concentrated at the inlets and outlets of major and medium-sized lakes along the Maine River valleys and coastal sites. Travel on the ocean, Maine rivers, and major lakes in dugout canoes characterized the Archaic period. For about 7,000 years, Maine Indians used heavy wooden dugout canoes, which are not readily portable. We have not found any of the dugouts, but heavy woodworking stone gouges and chisels that were used to make the dugouts, and perhaps other large wooden objects, are common. Travel between flat water must have been by foot trail.
Right, and I know you've done a lot of work on stone gouges, especially as they relate to the Great Lakes and the old copper culture.
Oh yeah, the stone gouges, they're one of the first ground, polished, and refined stone tools that we see in the Northeast. And those go back thousands of years, like 6,000 BCE, if not earlier. A series of cultures, named by archaeologists, usually after a specific stone spearhead type, must have occupied the Maine coast. Their coastal sites are now underwater, and only a few have been found preserved in deposits on the bottom of the inshore Gulf of Maine. For the most part, we assume that the people on the coast were similar culturally to the ones we find living along interior rivers and lake shores. In a very few places along the central Maine coast, campsites with deposits formed around 4,500 to 4,000 years ago have survived above the rising sea level. The Nevin site is one of these. All of these coastal campsites before 4,000 years ago include swordfish bone, when food bone is preserved at all. The cultural names given to these coastal people are small stemmed point before about 4,200 years, and Moorhead phase between about 4,200 and 3,800 years. These people and their predecessors participated in a religious tradition commonly called red paint for the red ochre pigment added to their graves. Archaeologists now call the religion the Moorhead burial tradition, from about 6,000 to about 3,800 years. Then, sometime between 4,000 and 3,500 years ago, the coastal ecology changed, and the Gulf of Maine became increasingly tidal and cold. At about 3,600 years, a culture called the Susquehanna tradition, perhaps carried by an immigrant population with extensive debate about the issue, moved into or was adopted across New England and the Maritimes provinces. The Susquehanna tradition has origins, slightly older by a century or two, with very similar stone and bone technology as far south as the Savannah River Valley on the Georgia/North Carolina border. The northeast eastern variant was first recognized in the Susquehanna River Valley. Along the Gulf of Maine, the Susquehanna tradition people, or culture, were less maritime-oriented than their immediate predecessors, the Moorhead phase. They also made extensive use of the vast Maine Maritime's interior. Their stone tools included large, broad-bladed, stemmed knives, and stone drills that must have been used to make something out of wood that was put together with lashings or pegs about the diameter of a modern pencil. It is possible that these were lightly framed boats, or some new variant of the dugout canoe. Yeah, just one thing I want to point out here with this transition from Maritime Archaic to Susquehanna.
Right.
Most of the heavy groundstone tools that the Maritime Archaic use practically fall out of use when the Susquehanna arrive. And the Susquehanna, they're bringing their own woodworking tradition, mainly the grooved axe. That's nowhere in the Maritime Archaic toolkit, whether in Labrador or Maine. So that's why that abandonment of most of the woodworking tools, that's why they're thinking a lightly framed boat, like possibly a birch bark. These people hunted for terrestrial mammals, deer, moose, bear, fur bearers, and congregated seasonally at locations that were good for harvesting fish runs. Their burial practices were different from preceding Moorhead burial tradition. Their culture changed slowly over the centuries and may have been related to the first of the ceramic period cultures in the region. Environmental change in the Gulf of Maine and along the immediate coast has been more dramatic. Although these environmental changes would have primarily affected life along the Maine coast and near coast, they might also have changed the relative population levels of interior and coastal Maine, seasonal movements of people between the coast and interior, and cultural relationships between coast and interior. Before about 3,500 years ago, the Gulf of Maine had a low tidal amplitude, a few feet, and generated warm surface water, at least during summer. At 4,200 to 3,800 years ago, surface water was warm enough to allow swordfish to swim inshore around the Gulf of Maine. The overarching environmental trend along the coast has been relative sea level rise. This is a complex effect of bedrock erosion from removal of the weight of the ice at the end of the Ice Age and the worldwide sea level rise as ice melted. First, the bedrock rebounded quickly after ice melt, but since about 12,500 calendar or 10,500 radiocarbon years ago, Maine coastal bedrock has been sinking at various rates. The maximum exposure of the shore, maximum relative sea level retreat, and land exposure at 12,500 years is now about 65 meters, roughly 200 feet under sea level in the Gulf of Maine. There are hints of an erosional shoreline from 12,500 years ago under the Gulf of Maine at this depth. Sea level has been rising at varying rates, but inexorably since 12,500 years, or about 10,500 radiocarbon. The rate of rise was at first very quick, to about 20 meters at 10,500 calendar years, then slower at about 5 meters, 16 feet, at 6,003 meters, 10 feet, at 4,000 years. As sea levels rose, the estuaries and bays of the Maine coast would have progressively flooded, moving shellfish habitat in the limited intertidal zone slowly inland. As a result, any shoreline campsites, archaeological sites, would be successively flooded, mostly eroded. Fishermen, scallop draggers, find stone tools of appropriate style and age at appropriate depths underwater around the Gulf of Maine. Archaeologists and geologists have documented stone tools from former beach deposits with fossil or dead shellfish beds nearby at several places on the central Maine coast. These associated deposits probably mark coastal campsites from which shellfish were harvested, likely producing shell middens. The only remaining evidence of the campsites is the stone tools. I just want to say, some of those stone tools that they're recovering from the seabed and those ancient shell beds, it's mainly things like the net sinkers, plummets, a few stone spear points or atlatl points, and ulus, like the semi-lunar stone knives.
Right.
Those are the main things that they've been recovering. And I think they've found a handful of gouges too, about 3,500 to 3,400 years ago. Something dramatic happened as relative sea level continued its slow rise in the Gulf of Maine. This dramatic effect contradicts a model of slow sea level rise and slow gradual increase in tidal amplitude that had been commonly accepted by geoscientists and archaeologists until recently. The evidence, Shaw et al., 2010, points to rising sea level cutting through a glacial till ridge and flooding into what is now the Minas Basin inner Bay of Fundy. Such a geographic change had an effect on Gulf of Maine tides residents, such that the amplitude of the tides increased dramatically in a few hundred years. Perhaps the tides increased from a few feet to 6 feet to 8 feet. The effect was noticeable around the Gulf of Maine, as seen in the change from mud to sand deposition, increased tidal current flow. In Boston Harbor, Rosen et al., 1993. As sea level has continued to rise, tidal amplitude has increased further to the 8 to 13 foot tides now present on most of the Maine coast. So, added on to the effect of average sea level rise in the Gulf of Maine, a few feet, is the increase in tidal amplitude, rising the highest spring rising tide water levels faster than sea level. As tidal amplitude has increased, of course, so has the width and extent of the intertidal zone exposed at low tide. The increase in intertidal zone shellfish populations probably also had an effect on inshore ecology and the people dependent upon it. Over the last few millennia, cold water from the Labrador Current increased in flow around the headland of Nova Scotia and into the bottom waters of the Gulf of Maine. As an effect of increasing tidal amplitude, tidal mixing has driven an increasingly strong upwelling of the cold bottom water along the eastern Maine coast and counterclockwise circulation of that colder water around the Gulf of Maine. The warmer summer surface waters that supported inshore swordfish about 4,000 years ago are now replaced by colder water in wide intertidal zones. This cold water upwelling plus the tidal mixing now supports a cold water inshore fishery, including lobster, of course, and clams, seals, birds, flounder, sculpin, sturgeon, and winter or spring spawning codfish. What we have now is radically different from the 4,000-year-old warm summer surface water fishery. At the same time, the cold Gulf of Maine causes fog and cooler, wetter summer conditions on the coast than in the interior, supporting a coastal spruce forest that is more favorable to moose than to deer. The ceramic period of Maine, 2,800 years ago. We do not understand the details of the link between the environmental changes and Native American technology and culture changes, if there is a direct link. There were a series of dramatic technological changes in Indian life between about 3,500 to 2,500 years ago. The outcome of these changes was Native American life more or less as recorded by the first European explorers. Sometime between about 3,500 and 2,400 years ago, it seems, Maine Indians invented or adopted the birch bark canoe. Whether the birch bark canoe was invented here or perhaps in southern Canada, we don't know. It may have begun as a skin-covered boat or light frame construction and developed into the perfected forms we know as the Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, and other tribes' canoe designs of the 1800s. But the Maine forest certainly grew large, plentiful paper birch at the time, 3,000 years or afterward, and has since, as we all know, because of its modern canvas, plastic and aluminum copies. The birch bark is backportable, can be pulled upstream, can float in a few inches of water, as well as being usable on large bodies of water, and can carry a decent load of gear. One can pull and drag a birch bark canoe up a beaver dammed stream and portage it between drainages, but one cannot do that with a dugout. We have not found any birch bark canoe pieces archaeologically, but the Maine and northern New England archaeological record changes dramatically between 3,500 and 2,400 years ago. The large, heavy stone gouges and axes of the Archaic period become rare, and archaeological sites of about 3,000 years of age and younger show up on good camping places on smaller drainages where one can easily go with a lighter canoe, not with a dugout. Canoes enabled an increasingly dispersed settlement pattern around lakes and smaller streams during the ceramic period, as well as increasing long-distance trade travel. Based on stone tools and the distribution of settlements, we are certain that a well-developed, effective birch canoe was in widespread use in Maine and adjacent maritimes in northern New England by 2,300 to 2,200 years ago, at least. Rivers and large streams became highways in a complex network that involved both upstream with a pole as needed and downstream travel with connecting portages. Certain waterways were useful for upstream or downstream travel at certain times of the open water season, depending on water flow conditions. Thus, the network of canoe routes at times included one-way routes, and they changed with the seasons. One thing, before I read the next parts, one thing I want to point out is this change that we see between 3,500 and 2,400 years ago in Maine and the Northeast is also happening around the Great Lakes. From eastern Maine and the Canadian Maritimes all the way out into Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and Lake Huron, all those communities are using heavy stone tools, whether it's polished stone gouges or heavy woodworking adzes and axes. Those become incredibly rare between 3,500 and 2,400 years ago. When you look up over in Copper Country with the OCC, there's a transitional period here, and not only most of their heavy copper woodworking tools, including their copper gouges and socketed adzes, but pretty much all of their defining tools and weapons, even the socketed spear points and large knives, those eventually fall out of use entirely. So there's to me, it seems like there's something big going on there for such a widespread change.
Right, probably a cultural shift.
Yeah, and it kind of looks like that too, because this big change happens around the time of Poverty Point. So yeah, there's something going on there. Another technological change occurred at about 2,800 years ago, as Maine Native Americans adopted or borrowed from further south along the Atlantic coast the making of fired clay pottery. Archaeologists call the last 2,800 to 3,000 years or so of Maine pre-contact culture the ceramic period. Prior to the advent of ceramic pots, boiling cooking was done by heating rocks in a fire and dropping the hot rock into a wooden or bark container. During the ceramic period, Native Americans developed a generalized hunting, fishing, and gathering economy based upon the mobility, birch bark canoes, and cooking food in ceramic ceramic pots. They combine subsistence and settlement strategies to move people to seasonally available resources, or to move food, such as baskets of clams or dead moose, and other resources to camp or village locations. Another technological change was that created what we think of as traditional Native American life was the introduction of bow and arrow sometime around 2000 to 1500 years ago, around CE 500. The technology that preceded the bow and arrow was a thrown spear, thrown with the help of throwing stick. The throwing stick we today call the atlatl, which is an Aztec word. Bows, arrows, spears, and throwing sticks are mostly made of wood. So how do we know? The throwing sticks sometimes were fitted with bone hooks, and the throwing sticks, or the thrown spears, were sometimes weighted with bone or stone weights of symmetrical shape. Moreover, an arrow must be tipped with a point that weighs less than a certain weight, a few ounces. So all stone points that weigh too much for an arrow are either spear points or knives. The stone weights disappear from the archaeological record of our region about 3,000 years ago, and small stone points, possible arrow points, become common after about 2,000 years ago. So yeah, that those balancing. Okay, like for one thing, I'll chime in here with what I know.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, the atlatls, or the atlaches, that's another pronunciation. We actually have in situ finds from the Kentucky and Tennessee region with the Shell Mound Archaic, and they've been found at Indian Knoll. That's one site. I think they've been found at Chickerville, and they've been found at several sites there in Shell Middens. There's also rock art. The Jeffers site in southwestern Minnesota. That's a good one because it shows atlatls with banner stones attached to them. And for those who don't know, banner stones, those are the symmetrical weights that this paragraph is talking about. And, like we see with this big toolkit change in the Northeast and the Great Lakes, banner stones are another item that fall out of use during this 3,500, 2,400 period window. Like after that time, you can't really find any in situ. And the ones that are found are generally interpreted as like repurposed finds that people found either through mound construction, village construction, or agriculture.
All right. I appreciate you offering that. Is it kind of weird for you to do so much reading, about Maine?
In one sitting without like going aside to like Google stuff like after every other paragraph just to like build a lot of context.
Right.
I mean, it is a little bit, but not too much. Not with stuff that like I'm really unfamiliar with, because I've done research in Maine and the Northeast.
Right.
So like I can chime in like a lot more than I can with other topics.
No, I appreciate it. No, I was just wondering because I know you do a lot of research in the Americas, but a lot about the OCC, which isn't always, directly related to Maine. I just wondered if it was, different for you to do so much on Maine.
Oh no, it's not really too weird.
Right
But
on.
one of the things that I'm less familiar with is the ceramic period, because I've been spending so much time on the archaic and the relationship between like the Midwest and the Northeast, which there surprisingly is. And like one thing that's worth touching on is the sea level rise issue. It's not just restrained. It's not limited to the archaic, because our coastal Maine, it's rugged and it's always deteriorating. Like it doesn't happen all at once. Obviously, little bits here and there, but it's not just the maritime archaic sites, especially their cemeteries. It's the cultures before them, like the Laurentians. They were in Maine, up in the north and in the south too. The Gulf of Maine archaic tradition. They're the ones with the earliest stone gouges and like a ground slate and ground stone toolkit that we know of.
Right.
And it's even the cultures like after all those into the ceramic period and historic. The sea level rise. It gives us like a biased view of what the complete society would have looked like, whether it's ceramic or further back in the archaic. Because one of the interesting debates going on right now is how much like subsistence economy was focused on the coastline, and like archaeologists are having a hard time finding evidence of that because of the sea level rise and coastal erosion.
Right.
But we know stuff was going on around the coast because of early swordfish remains, deep water fish found on islands in the coast, and like in situ stone tools and spear points or knives or the dart points in the flooded coastline.
Yeah, and it is like Graham Hancock says, if we ever looked, we'd find stuff. Well, they already do find some stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not true that there's like zero evidence.
And,
Well, there's zero evidence for his nonsense, but there's not zero evidence for like people living on the coast, even the ones that are gone.
One thing that's worth pointing out with Graham is, since archaeologists are exploring the coastlines, not just in the Gulf of Maine and New England, but around the world,
Right.
It's pretty obvious Graham based his initial idea on Atlantis and Ignatius Donnelly.
Oh,
Like
yes.
you get that like reading his books and listening to him talk. But you notice all those archaeologists exploring the coastlines are all, or like we read earlier, earlier, like everyday fishermen or people that fish, whether it's scallop dredgers or people dredging for like archaeological academic reasons, they're not pulling up tons of stone monuments. They're not pulling up tons of copper or iron or steel or anything like that.
Nope.
Stuff that you would expect from his his coastal civilization hypothesis, his civilization with 18th century navigational technology. And because of that, he's shifted the goalpost again. He's now saying, well, maybe they took another different route and they didn't need metal.
Oh, who would have thought?
Yeah, so it's like each time archaeologists like show like pretty much conclusively that this civilization that he's cooked up over the decades doesn't exist. He just shifts the goalpost and he makes it so that like in a way it can't be refuted, and he's going to keep doing that, and because that's what he's been doing like since the 90s.
But I feel like I understand that in some senses you feel like you can't refute it. I feel like the stuff that I've shown does refute it.
Oh no, it does.
We do know what DNA did, what paths it took, how it dropped off and became other cultures. We do know the cultures that came before. That's what, like I said, we're going to do more languages and stuff, and how languages moved, and then how religious ideas. He just points to here and here and here. Well, I know how that happened, and so I feel like which we've done some of. We're going to do a lot more, but we've done some already. You know, where I kind of help and show you how it's like one little part. It's not they went way over across the water and just dropped this out of nowhere. You know, even like people talk about like Malta. Like I watched some video where Professor Dave was talking about Malta. You know, some guy that talks about nonsense about Malta. It's a similar thing. It's like people keep saying, you know, oh well, these stuff come out of nowhere and they're mysteries. It's literally not mysteries. It's not out of nowhere.
Michael Butt.
But what I'm saying is, so to me, but it's a similar kind of.
It is
not exactly the same as Graham Hancock, but I find all of them to be similar in a sense that they're all, you know, listed under. People put them in the category of pseudo archaeology or pseudo history or whatever, because all of them have this similar thing. Even if they don't call stuff mystery, they act as if they are mysteries. When archaeology, language, now if you study the language, the DNA movements like I do, and the religion stuff, and then the cultural stuff, and you put all that in context like I try to do with our stuff, it doesn't sound like a mystery.
No.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, so when you say that it is mysteries, or like, let's just say this, if I only were to give you the archaeology, the rest of the stuff would seem mysterious. But once you add the DNA migrations and the language migrations, and then like you said, the cultural shifts that happen, we can see, and you start putting them in context, it doesn't seem like a mystery. Maybe why exactly it happened could be a little bit confusing or not fully understood. It's not a mystery though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, the way they like, well, archaeology can't explain it. Well, here's the neat fact about science. Science understanding of history is not limited to archaeology. We also have ethnography. We have DNA. We have people that study soil, and so we can understand environments that happened before, or environmental patterns that help. Like we're talking about the trees or whatever, you know, the shorelines. It's not limited to just looking at the cultural background of one area, and then as you said too, which I also talk about all the time, looking at a whole bunch of regions and how cultural things are happening like in unison. Yeah, because and then understanding that those people do have migration, at least, you know, ideas and things in beliefs and languages. Mm-hmm. It stops being mysterious. It's like, so I feel like it's not even correct to say we can't debunk him. Maybe if you only stuck to DNA, you can't debunk. Or maybe if you only stuck to the archaeology of one site, you can't debunk it. But when you look at the whole corpus of all the different stuff and what it's doing and when, it does, I feel, debunk him.
Oh, no, it does.
You get what I'm trying to say?
No, yeah, I meant that. No, like you're bringing facts to the table, stuff that's been shown time and time again, whether it's genetics or ethnography. I get that.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is the way, you know, and it's not just Graham. Like you can find this pattern with all of like this group of people, the ones that take like these ancient sites that they call mysterious, they take them out of context and say, well, there was nothing here going on before. This site comes out of nowhere. It's built of big blocks, and it seems like this incoming group just inhabited the site and incorporated it into their mythology. like you see that over and over again. And when you push against them and present evidence, they have this, they'll make stone walls, they'll stonewall you. Sometimes they won't respond, they'll block you, or they'll strawman you with these fake arguments for their followers to attack, or they'll shift goalposts so that, I'll give an example of something I saw a while back. One person thought the reason we can't find this lost civilization is because their architecture was super advanced and they figured out how to make biodegradable buildings.
Oh,
yeah, that's what I mean. They'll just keep shifting the argument around and around. You'd think even with biodegradable buildings, you'd find foundations or something to support the structure. You think you'd find something like a trace, like a little piece of metal, like tungsten, like a tungsten cube.
Well, even say biodegradable. So trees are biodegradable. They certainly go back to the environment. But I know that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but when I was studying in China, there's all these places they know because there's holes that fit trees, even though there isn't any tree in the hole, and they're in a pattern that if you put trees in those holes, it ends up like houses or structures or whatever. And so they know that there's structures, and they can tell by the size of some of the trees, that what size the buildings might have been. So I think that anyone that says that even if it's biodegradable, out of what exactly, which I think is what's weird too, is why they always look at sites and go, it has to be older. They will not believe that when an archaeologist says, well, this site's 12,000, they'll say, well, it could be 20. Well, what the fuck? Or they say it's 5,600, and they'll say, well, I think it's 8, or older. They just fucking and I watched the thing on Malta, which I thought was funny when he goes, well, and we know the Neanderthals got there. I was thinking, yeah, the Neanderthals lived at a time when maybe that island wasn't so far from the shore, like we said here, about 200 feet down. Yeah, that'll certainly change where something we think is an island, how far it really is. But in general, the fact that I really hate, even if they don't want to agree, I really hate how they intentionally attack science and archaeologists instead of attacking the ideas. I feel like that is, to me, the worst. If you have some wacky idea and you want to try to present it, but you don't think it's enough, just leave it there. Don't go, well, it's the archaeologists that don't want it. It's Damien that doesn't want to think outside the box. No, if you didn't provide me shit like an archaeologist, if you don't provide them good evidence or some reason to even think it's possible, yeah, they're not. Believe it or not, they shouldn't just accept you, or they should question you. Come on. No. I don't have many people can question everything I do. Please do.
Yeah, same with
me. I mean, look at all the links. Look at all the sources. Check everything I fucking say. Here's the other thing too. I told you before. If you can show me an error, wow, then I will check it out. And if I agree it's an error, I will fucking change right there, right then. Not 10 years from now. Not think about it for 50 days.
yeah. Damien told me this one thing, but I don't know if I should trust him because he seems affiliated with the archaeological mafia.
Oh my god!
So and I'm not. About it for a month
I literally am not affiliated with them at all, or any academia. But also, I do like truth and truth seekers, and so I do like academia because they generally are truth seekers. So yeah, and that doesn't mean I say I support everything that Cambridge College puts out, but I may support many Cambridge, professors or something, because I think that it's more likely that big donations could influence a college, just like how Trump, right? He wants to say, I'll take away your funding if you don't teach more non-woke stuff. Well, that doesn't have to do with the college professor and what they're doing, although the school can be hindering them. They still have their own, their own mind. They still can produce what they do. They still have their own politics. It's not like there's some mafia where, I'm just making a comment that I feel like the institution could have more of a thing we should should question than the professor. But I still am open to questioning, people's stuff on the basis of evidence, not like just some conspiracy theory. Which is so weird to me. How come all the conspiracy theories seem to go one way? The conspiracy theorists always see like academia, but never go, well, what about all these pseudo-archaeologists? Why don't we have conspiracies against them? Why don't we question, are they telling us the truth? How do we know Graham's telling us the truth? How do we know that Billy Carson is telling us the truth? How do we know that any of these fuckers are saying the truth? Why do you give them a complete pass and are skeptical of everybody else? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, all these academics spending like sometimes years of their life to publish a paper or even a book for free, and then you have like people like Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson or these other ones who either publish books, give tours, presentations that you have to like pay ridiculous amounts for, and like
exactly. And I say,
like,
so we don't think that
they're not
maybe
really
they're
questioned.
they need to be questioned. Seriously,
They
I
do.
understand how you could say you're being skeptical of people telling the truth and literally believe people that are not telling you the truth. Like I just feel like Joe Rogan, like the fact that he promotes every other nonsense under the sun, doesn't that make you question that? I just seriously.
Yeah, I mean that'd be something to do. Like ask one of these people who really listen to what Graham Hancock or any of these other people have to say, and just ask them, like, do you question Graham's truthfulness at all? Like, do you think he's being honest with you all the time?
I think
that he's really the down to earth person you think he is all the time.
I think it's like a cult. They think like a cult.
That's
whether
how
or not it's not Graham Hancock cult, but they think like that because they don't allow new stuff in, and they don't even challenge what the leader is offering. And then of course they go, well, these other people also agree with Graham. Yeah, the other ones that are Graham fanboys, those people, the ones that copy his same type of shtick. You mean those people? Why do you trust those followers of Graham to also give you the truth? And then when they say trust Graham, but they also do his thing and they're also out to make money, it's like, you don't feel that could be a grift?
Yeah, and that's kind of like ironic in a way, because Randall Carlson, and for those who don't know Randall Carlson, he's like one of the big supports for the recent stuff Graham's been talking about. Randall focuses a lot on the geology side, especially with the Ice Age megafloods. Like he said, like some sites, especially in the Columbia River up in northwestern United States, like he said some sites up there are caused by one huge megaflood, not multiple, which the geology shows. Randall's recently made a university claiming to support freedom of thought and a return to traditional academic values. The funny thing is, traditional academic values would have you questioning everybody, especially your teachers, and you don't really see that with this crowd. So what's going on there? There's this giant mishmash, this mix-up here.
Like I said, it's not real skepticism. It's not real truth-seeking, and not really. It's pseudo skepticism. Go ahead and keep reading.
Okay. About 900 years ago, around CE 1100, corn, bean, and squash horticulture, the final major addiction to affect native life in Maine before European introduced changes, arrived in southernmost Maine, York, Cumberland counties, along the coast to Pemaquid and up the Kennebec River to Norridge Row. Life over most of Maine was based almost entirely upon harvesting wild resources until after contact with Europeans, except in southwestern Maine, where corn, bean, and squash garden was adopted from southern New England. Only in southwestern Maine, native people adopted the practice of growing corn and beans in gardens during the summer. This agriculture affected southwestern Maine, were primarily causing population growth and larger village size, but eastern Maine remained outside the influence of agriculture. Agricultural villages, where they occurred, may have been more dispersed hamlets with individual farmsteads, each with an acre of corn. Champlain's illustration of Native American cornfields around what is now Saco in Biddeford, circa 1605, is schematic but probably useful. We know from accounts dating to about 1605 also that some of these agricultural villages had populations of up to 1,000 people, but the buildings seem to not have been concentrated into palisaded, fortified villages, as was common among the Iroquoian speakers of New York, for example. First Europeans. John Cabot in CE 1498 surveyed the New England coastline, including Maine, representing England. Giovanni da Verrazzano in CE 1524, a Florentine explorer sailing for France, who documented the coast. European contact with Maine began with John Cabot in 1498, followed by Giovanni de Verrazzano, who first stepped ashore in 1524. The French established early, short-lived settlements in 1604, while the English established the unsuccessful Palm Colony in 1607. Other early, albeit temporary, European encounters included explorers in 1605. There are many stories of Norsemen exploring as far south as Maine, but there is currently no documented evidence for that. In 1497, John Cabot made the first of 2 documented voyages to explore the New World on behalf of Henry VII of England, and it's very likely on one of the voyages reached as far south as the coast of Maine. Cabot's expeditions were based out of the fishing port of Bristol, England, and Bristol merchant William Weston followed up on Cabot's efforts in 1499. Cabot's cruise ported, as written in a letter to the Duke of Milan in 1497. The sea there is swarming with fish, which can be taken not only with the net, but in baskets with a stone, so that it sinks in the water. In fact, Bristol fishermen had already been sailing to Iceland for cod fishing, and after Weston's return, there is anecdotal evidence that Europeans from England to Portugal regularly fished the waters of the northeast waters, including the Gulf of Maine, immediately afterwards. Following disputed rights over the northeast coasts between Spain and England, the next documented Europeans to explore the coast of Maine were by Giovanni de Verrazzano under the French flag in 1524, and then the Portuguese explorer Estevão Gomes in service of the Spanish Empire in 1525. They mapped the coastline, including the Penobscot River, but did not settle, though Verrazzano's efforts added a French claim to the area. The first European settlement in the area was made on the St. Croix Island in 1604 by a French party that included Samuel de Champlain and Matthew de Costa. The French named the area Acadia. French and English settlers would contest central Maine until the 1750s, when the French were defeated in the French and Indian War. The French developed and maintained strong relations with the local Indian tribes through Catholic missionaries. English colonists, sponsored by the Plymouth Company, founded a settlement in Maine in 1607, the Popham Colony at Phillipsburg, but it was abandoned the following year. A French trading post was established at present-day Castine in 1613 by Claude de Saint-Étienne de la Tour, and may represent the first permanent European settlement in New England. The Plymouth Colony, established on the shores of Cape Cod Bay in 1620, set up a competing trading post at Penobscot Bay in the 1620s. The territory between the Mi'kmaq and Kennebec rivers was first called the Province of Maine in a 1622 land pat granted to Sir Ferdinando Gorges and John Mason. The two split the territory along the Piscataqua River in a 1629 pact that resulted in the province of New Hampshire being formed by Mason in the south and New Somersetshire being created by Georges to the north in what is now southwestern Maine. The present Somerset County in Maine preserves this early nomenclature. One of the first English attempts to settle the Maine coast was by Christopher Levitt, an ancient for Georges and a member of the Plymouth Council for New England. After securing a royal grant for 6,000 acres, 24 square kilometers, of land on the site of present-day Portland, Maine, Levitt built a stone house and left a group of settlers behind when he returned to England in 1623 to drum up support for his settlement, which he called York, after the city in England of his birth, originally called Matrigone by the local Abenaki. Later settlers named it Falmouth, and it is known today as Portland. Levitt's settlement, like the Popham Colony, also failed, and the settlers Levitt left behind were never heard from again. Levitt did sail back across the Atlantic to meet the Massachusetts Bay Colony governor John Winthrop at Salem in 1630, died on the return voyage without ever returning to his settlement. The new Somersetshire colony was small, and in 1639 Georges received a second patent from Charles I, covering the same territory as George's 1629 settlement with Mason. George's second effort resulted in the establishment of more settlements along the coast of southern Maine and along the Piscataqua River, with a formal government under his distant relation Thomas Georges. A dispute about the bounds of a 1630 land grant led in 1643 to the short-lived formation of Lagonia on territory that encompassed a large area of the Georges grant, modern Portland, Scarborough, and Saco. The 1629 Charter of Massachusetts Bay set the northern sea-to-sea boundary 3 miles north of the northernmost part of the Merrimack River. After parliamentary victory in the Wars of the Three Kingdoms and installation of the Puritan Oliver Cromwell, a 1652 survey by the Massachusetts reported the source of the Merrimack as Lake Winnipesaukee and set the boundary at 3 miles north of 43 degrees, 40 minutes, 12 seconds north, which would put it at 43 degrees, 43 minutes, 12 seconds north. Surveyors reckoned on the Maine coast that this corresponded to Upper Clapboard Island in Casco Bay, just north of modern-day Portland, Maine. This meant Massachusetts' patent, encompassing all the English colonial settlements in the Masons' lands, New Hampshire, in both Laconia and George's lands, western Maine, which ended around modern-day Bath, Maine. The parliamentarian Puritan colony of Massachusetts set commissioners to the Anglican Royalist colonies to enforce jurisdiction. Opponents were arrested and jailed under the leader of the resistance, Edward Godfrey, capitulated. Both George's province of Maine and Laconia had been absorbed into the Massachusetts Bay Colony by 1658. The Massachusetts claim would be overturned in 1676, but Massachusetts again asserted control by purchasing the territorial claims of the Georges' heirs. In 1669, territory of Sagadahoc between the Kennebec and St. Croix rivers, which is now eastern Maine, was granted by Charles II to his brother James, Duke of York. Under the terms of this grant, all the territory from the St. Lawrence River to the Atlantic Ocean was constituted as Cornwall County and was governed as part of the Duke's proprietary province of New York. At times, this territory was claimed by New France as part of Acadia. In 1674, the Dutch briefly conquered Acadia, renaming the colony New Holland. In 1686, James, now king, established the Dominion of New England. This political entity eventually combined all of the English colonial territories from Delaware Bay to the St. Croix River. Dominion collapsed in 1689, and a new patent was issued by William III of England and Mary II of England in 1691. This became effective in 1692 when the territory between the Piscataqua and the St. Croix, all of modern Maine, became part of the new province of Massachusetts Bay as Yorkshire, a name which survives in present-day York County.
Right on.
Okay, so this is a map of the Wabanaki Confederacy / Alliance, or Wabanaki Mahuakaki, 1680s through 1862 and 1993 through present. We have
there's
a
the wampum belt, and then the seal for it, and then there's the actual
the territory,
right?
All the different groups, the district, the Mi'kmaq districts, and the Abenaki bands. Wabanaki Confederacy. The Wabanaki Confederacy, or Wabanaki, translated to people of the Dawn or Easterner. Also, Wabanakia, Dawnland, is a North American First Nations and Native American confederation of 5 principal Eastern Algonquin nations: Abenaki, Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, Peshko-Tomokati, and Penobscot. There were more tribes, along with many bands, that were once part of the confederation. Native tribes, such as the Nanrantsuak, Alamusisi, Pennacook, Sokoki, and Kanabas, though through massacres, tribal consolidation, and ethnic label shifting, were absorbed into the 5 larger national identities. Members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, the Wabanaki, are located in and named for the area which they call Wabanaki Dawnland, roughly the area that became the French colony of Acadia. The territory boundaries encompass present-day Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont in the United States, and New Brunswick, mainland Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Island, Prince Edward Island, and some of Quebec south of the St. Lawrence River, Anticosti, and Newfoundland in Canada. The Wabanaki Confederacy was known by many names, but it is remembered as Wabanaki, which shares a common etymological origin with the name of the Abenaki people. All Abenaki are Wabanaki, but not all Wabanaki are Abenaki. Historically, the Confederacy went by many other names, some shared and some unique to individual members. The Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy, and Wolastoqiyik called it Wolastoqiyik Convention Council. The Passamaquoddy also had their own name, Towakutinea, related to one another. Finally, the Penobscot interchangeably called it Bezagowak, those united into one, and Gizangowak, completely united. Early contact period, 1497. Small-scale confederacies in and around what would become the Wabanaki Confederacy were common at the time of post-Viking European contact. The earliest known confederacy was the Maotian Confederacy, located within the historic Eastern Penobscot cultural region. Its capital, Katisquit, located around modern Bangor, Maine, would play a significant role as a political hub for the future Wabanaki Confederacy, for example.
Right, so it just shows that confederacies was the norm.
Yeah, it's not a recent idea. It goes way back.
It goes way back. And like I said, if you look at the larger corpus of, which we are going to do, but when you look at all the other, things, the whole area close to the Great Lakes literally is like a lot of confederacies compared to the rest of the United States. It just doesn't make any sense other than they're obviously sharing some sort of an idea.
Yeah, and like that shared idea, it not just like the political system, but the stuff that they're making, whether it's clothing, basketry, or tools. Like there's similarity throughout that whole Confederacy area.
Absolutely.
with like nuance and like regional variation, like you'd almost expect in some cases.
Exactly.
Well,
And this right here shows the language connection, because of course the Algonquin language is connected to the Alaic, which go all the way to California. But the one stuff in Maine relates to the larger corpus of the Eastern Algonquin language.
See, and what's interesting, even this language distribution, you can find a related toolkit in that like same area going back to the Archaic. So that's pretty interesting. It's like this whole region was an interaction sphere before the Algonquin language showed up.
That's cool. Yeah, I just like to show the languages and stuff, how things relate, so people can see the larger context.
Yeah, Eastern Algonquin languages. The Eastern Algonquin languages constitute a subgroup of the Algonquin languages. Prior to European contact, Eastern Algonquin consisted of at least 17 languages, whose speakers collectively occupied the Atlantic coast of North America and adjacent inland areas, from what are now the Maritimes of Canada to North Carolina. The available information about individual languages varies widely. Some are known only from one or two documents containing words and phrases collected by missionaries, explorers, or settlers, and some documents contain fragmentary evidence about more than one language or dialect. Many of the Eastern Algonquin languages were greatly affected by colonization and dispossession. Mi'kmaq and Maliseet Passamaquoddy have appreciable numbers of speakers, but Western Abenaki and Lenape, Delaware, are each reported to have fewer than 10 speakers after 2000. Yeah, that's quite the fall-off. Eastern Algonquin subdivisions: Abenakian, Abenaki, Etchemin, Maliseet Passamaquoddy, and Mi'kmaq. Southern New England, Loop A and B, Massachusetts, Mohegan Pequot, Narragansett, and Quiripi. Delaware and Mohegan, Nanticoke, Nanticoke, and Piscataway, Powhatan, and Pamlico. Abenaki is an endangered Eastern Algonquin language of Quebec and the northern states of New England. The language has Eastern and Western forms, which differ in vocabulary and phonology, and are sometimes considered distinct languages. Geographic distribution: Quebec, New Brunswick, Canada, and Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, United States. The Abenaki, Wabanaki, are an indigenous people of the northeastern woodlands of Canada and the United States. They are an Algonquin-speaking people and part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. The word Abenaki and its syncope, Abenaki, are both derived from Wabanaki, or Wolastoqiyik, meaning people of the Dawnland in the Abenaki language. While the two terms are often confused, the Abenaki are one of several tribes in the Wabanaki Confederacy. The Eastern Abenaki language was predominantly spoken in Maine, while the Western Abenaki language was spoken in Quebec, Vermont, and New Hampshire. While Abenaki speakers share cultural traits, they historically did not have a centralized government. They came together as a post-contact community after their original tribes were decimated by colonization, disease, and warfare. Abenaki mythology. The Abenaki people religious beliefs are part of the Midewiwin tradition, with ceremonies.
Right, which the person that was Mi'kmaq said that their cultural way of organizing themselves was the Midwin tradition.
With ceremonies led by medicine keepers called Midawin or Midawino. The Midewiwin in Ojibwe syllabics right there.
Yeah.
Also spelled Midawin and Midewiwin, or the Grand Medicine Society, is a religious society of some of the indigenous peoples of the Maritimes, New England, and Great Lakes regions in North America.
And I personally think it probably went from the Great Lakes region over to the east, along with language and other stuff, maybe even the boats, and newer technology.
And it wouldn't surprise me if like the Grand Medicine Society concept went back like centuries, or even like 1,000+ years.
Yeah, I think it could go back 2,000 something plus years.
Yeah, because like that's really what we see like in the archaeological record. A lot of like the technological innovations, especially like with copperworking and like the banner stones, and even horticulture, like with sunflowers and squash. All of that stuff either originates with the Great Lakes or the Midwest, and it spreads eastward.
Right.
And coming with like even pottery too. And so coming with that, there's going to be different social practices, like you would think.
Absolutely.
Based on other cultures and some ethnography. Its practitioners are called Midu, and the practices of Midewiwin are referred to as Mida. Occasionally, a male Mida is called Midawinini, which is sometimes translated into English as medicine man.
Right. And then I told you that I already have a blog where I went through and wanted to see from a North America into South America, all the major language families have either something that people call shaman or a medicine person, because sometimes they're women, so it's wrong to just say medicine man. But so I say, or like they have medicine keeper. That's probably a better way of putting it. But a medicine person is what I just say. But every single group has one in the United States, or I mean in the North America, in South America. So I want to, go through that one of these times, do a video and explain that. Maybe it'll be 2 videos, one for North, one for South. Because I feel like people, once again, they think that this stuff is a one-off or just this, Algonquin language family or something. It's a lot bigger than that.
Oh yeah, it's wide. Like Algonquin is surprisingly widespread. Like if you were thinking it was small scale.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about, that's true too. But I was talking about the medicine person, concept, and shamanism, which is a shaman and a medicine person, to me is relatively just a different word for the same, or something very similar. And I'm saying that either a shaman, because they don't always use that term, or a medicine person can literally be found in every major language family in the Americas. So which I think that some people will say, oh, there's a few in this one tribe in the South, there's a few in the tribe in the North. No, there's not a language family in the Americas that does not have at least one member of their language family that does this. I didn't do every single group individually, so I can't say if it's every member of every family, but it's certainly, there's not a language family that does not have at least one. Most of them probably have multiple, like the Algonquin. Just like the Great Spirit in Algonquin is literally like almost every single branch. So I think that's what I'm trying to show is that, like I said before, that religion and a lot of this other stuff are cultural products that move in cultural migration. So they spread and that's what explains like why people do certain things. And it did, and also, as people know, like we've already read from McMain's history and the cultural history, it's not Graham Hancock. Like one time someone had nothing and then they gave everything. No, a few people bring some new ideas, and then new people come, more new ideas, more people come, more new ideas, more people come later, more new ideas. It wasn't like a one and done and some one great person taught every single thing all the way up till, no. That's why I'm saying about debunked. It's debunked in the fact that that's why I feel like, because sometimes I go, well, we can never, disprove, these questions. Really? Because I feel like it's the opposite. The fact that we see everywhere across the earth that things kept moving and changing with new cultural patterns, how can you say one cultural pattern taught them all? What?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
No. According to historian Michael Angel, the Midowin is a flexible, tenacious tradition that provided an institutional setting for the teaching of the worldview, religious beliefs of the Ojibwa people. Commonly among the Anishinaabeg, Midowin is ascribed to Winnebago Onaibozo as its founder. However, among the Abenakis, Midowin is ascribed to Mataguas, who bestowed the Midowin upon his death to comfort his grieving brother Glooskap, who was still alive. In Abenaki mythology, the highest deity is Gitchi Niwas, also referred to by the titles of Tabaldak or Dabaldak, meaning Lord, and Niwaskowoga, meaning Great Spirit. According to the creation myth, there existed no sound or color prior until Gitchi Niwasku desired it and began the process of creating the world. To do so, he called forth a giant turtle called Toba from the primordial waters, crafting the land on top of Toba's shell and the clouds above that. After this creation, the Great Spirit fell asleep and began to dream of every creature and plant to ever exist, waking to discover that his dreams had become reality as he had slept. Thus, the newly created world was populated by living things.
Right on. And then here is what I was already talking about, how the Algonquin languages dispersal and everything with the red dot is ones that have a Great Spirit. And I list all the different languages, branches and it's almost all of them. Well, it's a red dot or a red, diamond or whatever. It just whatever has the red circles are the ones that are listed like in when you look up Great Spirit and you look up all the different Geechee Manitou and all these different things. But I then look separately, and all the ones in diamonds are ones I added that I realize are also in all these other languages. So
so it's pretty widespread.
And then if you also know, it is. And if you also notice the Native American Great Spirit, this is a Native American thing. And some of these are listed are not actually Algonquin. So it's beyond Algonquin. And it's also in more stuff than that too, because it's in the Northwest also. So in a couple other places, which we already had talked about before. And then I also think it was interesting that it was brought up about the primordial waters and the turtle. We had already talked about, and we're going to do a video too. It explains more about the primordial waters because it's a really important thing. And I also have a video where I talk about the primordial waters as being, the first like pre-creation, type of substance that is pretty universal across the world. And it's important too because I think a lot of times it's dark supposedly and water before any land or anything and before creation in a sense happens. And I think it's just night. It's explaining how like stars and planets look like they're like floating and moving around and how like the sun travels, or the moon phases, moves around. It's just trying to explain. It looks like to us, we don't know. And then also water does fall from the sky. So it's not like an illogical jump. I mean, it's of course not scientific, but I can see where if you look up and it looks like stuff is floating and then water comes down from the sky and it looks like out of nowhere, I can see where you put those together with a non-science understanding. Well, hey, it must be water up there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from that point of view.
Right, yeah. Well, I told you before, I think that, a lot of people that are atheists like to say, oh, religion, is because people want to control people. No, I think that if you listen to enough mythology, I don't think that's true. I can hear how they're like trying to understand the world as it seems to present itself. And if you have a magical thinking, and you think spirits are everywhere, and you look at the world and does all this stuff, you start explaining it. Well, that must be that spirit and this, I can see where you could, a non-scientific understanding with a belief in spirits could end up with a supernatural world. I think was a point, certainly after 5,000, when states took in pharaohs and kings and, the divine right of kings and, the mandate of heaven that you can rule. I do think that then people are hijacking, in a sense, religion to use it as a form of control. And then, of course, nowadays when people push nonsense, but I don't think it's limited to that's what just religious cults. I think it's what cults do, like cults of personality, like Donald Trump or like Graham Hancock pushing stuff. It becomes a cult of personality, which is still like a cult, and you just believe all this nonsense and you start having worldviews. Science is not trustable, or whatever.
Even with the lost technology crowd, there's a lot of crossing between that and like a traditional biblical view that views like older humanity as like somehow more pure and less corrupt than now. And you'll see some of these guys talking about especially in context about like establishing universities or older ways of teaching. Like a lot of it has to do with rebuilding like this old fallen world that they have in their mind and preventing the next coming apocalypse, which sounds to me like Revelations almost.
Right. Yeah, it sounds religious.
Yeah. So yeah, you're pretty spot on when you're calling it like a religious cult or just a cult in general.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So well, my point is, I don't think religion started as a cult. I do think the cult of personalities picked up religion as a tool, because I know even like, there's a saying that, religion happened when the first con man met the first fool. Well, at a certain point, and I do think that people were saying untruths or misunderstandings of nature because of the lack of science. So, and like I said, if you look at some of the mythology, it doesn't sound super controlling, like saying, "Oh, the world is wonderful and we're given all these things and we should protect nature." I don't buy that as being super controlling, in a detrimental way. But certainly when they're saying, oh, well, we have to welcome hierarchy and kings are great, and even those suffer, just do all the work and give everything to them. Or like the Bible where it says, slaves obey your master. What the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, it gets like the closer you get in time to our age, like the more fucked up it gets.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I do think absolutely religion at some point becomes just a thing to fucking tool to abuse, like the masses. Yeah, or even almost in a way that you could say like the opiate of the masses. But I think that why that is because it allows people to not require real world solutions. If I can just pray and then one day maybe God will finally just bless us, or if we do the right things, the world will come into balance and then things will be not like it is now, is in a sense like an opiate to the masses. It allows us to not go, we need to change our politicians. We need to demand that we have human rights. We gotta end things where capitalism is literally burning the planet with fossil fuels just so one rich dude can make money, or moving, data centers into every indigenous land or whatever, because we can steal their land like we always have, or put it into places where it's putting out pollutants, not in some rich person's backyard, but some poor person's backyard, in harming their future children because, look, who gives a shit, or polluting their waterways. We would not put up with this bullshit if we had a real world, reality mindset. And I don't feel that it means that you can't have people that are religious be or do or find good reasons. Like I said, some religious stuff tells you should care about the environment and see it as sacred, or all life is important. But I think that the point what I always try to make is that, but that's not a real morality. That's like a pseudo morality, because there really isn't like a life force that cares, for all our, things. We should care because we live here. And if we keep polluting the world as it is, the world, the planet, people always say the world will die or planet will die. No, the planet will do just fine. Human life may die. It may be that animals all go extinct, or even plant life or something, because of our behaviors. But the dirt itself, it doesn't actually need humans to be here.
No, I mean, fuck, we're already, because of industrialization, we're already going through another mass extinction.
But the mass extinction, that shit's, or it's going to be horrid. And people understand too. They're like, well, isn't it a good thing that we won't have ice ages if there's continued global warming? Yeah, when those ice age do, that's going to melt, and then all of Florida will just disappear. If that's totally okay with you, you need to also understand it also brings catastrophes for climate. Like it ends the, in a sense, the system of water that moves the warm air to the colder regions, like the currents and stuff. Why that's important? Well, let's see. If we end the stream of water going from, the warmer regions over, say, to Europe will start looking like, I don't know, Russia.
Oh, yeah,
like cold and snowy as fuck instead of somewhat tolerable. and or climate fluctuations where you get huge heat waves that kills all these people. So but if we were in a real thing where we realize no God's going to change that, and we have to change our behavior or demand that others stop their behaviors, it would change our world. But we have people, like I remember where they had this one thing, it's now a couple years, but like this one, because I thought it was just a crazy example. Because of changing climate, it was changing the grasslands in this meat packing plant or something, I can't remember. But it was causing so they had drought. When they had drought, then they couldn't put the cows there. So having a meat packing plant in a place where you can't survive with cows, or cows can't live, doesn't make any sense. So all these workers, conservative religious workers that worked there, felt they would go around it and pray, and then God would make the meat packing plant stay so they can stay and keep a job. That's the kind of crazy shit I'm talking about. Praying to God, instead of saying, let's get out the people that are allowing the climate to fucking die, or that aren't ensuring we have jobs, or aren't ensuring, we have good water so we can have lands, maybe in a drought area. It just, so you get what I'm trying to say.
I get exactly what you're saying.
Consequent to non-reality beliefs that they allow us, like I said, opiate of the masses, in a sense that it allows us to allow, or like I said, a lot of Christians are totally fine with capitalism. In fact, they're the far right is super okay with billionaires and trillionaires, and at the same time are okay with taking homeless, like in Florida, and busing them to other areas and just dumping them. Like those two things, how does that even go together? Especially with supposedly a Jesus that said, if you want to follow me, to the rich person, to take everything you have, sell it, give it to the poor, and then follow me. I mean, I just feel like it. So my point is, like someone said with me before, well, Damien, there's some, because I'm an anarchist and I'm also an atheist and anti-religion, but they'll say, oh, Damien, there was anarchist Christians, and I'm like, did you hear how they think? Did you hear which Christian values they value? I value those values too. That we should take care of the poor, that we should take care of the stranger, because it says that in the Bible too. To welcome the stranger, make them feel like they're welcome in your land. Treat them like a brother. Yeah, is that what we're doing? The Christian nationalism.
No.
Don't think so.
No.
So if you want to all become, stay Christians and become Christian anarchists, where you start really caring about people and the homeless and the people in need and being against the people that are rich, well, okay, I'll be friends with you. Cool. But if you want to be a toxic person, even if you're an atheist, and you support that kicking the homeless out, stealing the native land, polluting our water, polluting our air, I don't want to be friends with you. I see you as being part of the problem.
No, yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, fuck, even the Christian communities nowadays, like the ones you just mentioned, the Christian nationalists especially, like the ones that would really support Pete Hegseth, like that type. It's almost to the point now where they've just accepted that they're full of sin, and that they're just gonna, from their point of view, they're just gonna let the world burn, let Jesus come back and see if God fixes everything, rather than investing the time and work to try and fix what they can while they're still alive.
And sadly, some people get the mentality that helping the world burn is helping Jesus come back sooner.
Yeah,
which is also literally cynical and sick as hell.
There were some articles published not too long ago talking about Pete Hegseth and some of the leaders in the military, and they were actually like a fucking Armageddon cult. One of their objectives for this war in the Middle East with Iran was to fucking cause Armageddon.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So
yeah, when you have these mentalities, it can be, because they always go, oh, Damien, why do you speak out against religion, or why do you feel you should be an anti-religionist? Can't you just be a humanist? And I'm like, I am a humanist. One of the reasons I'm an anti-religionist is because I am a humanist. I literally see the toxic harm. That doesn't mean I'm anti-people being religious. If people want to have a religious faith, want to believe in flying, whatever beings, and yet they can function on a reality thing where we care about the water, the human life, animal life, people's rights to exist and happiness, and cool. Who gives a shit? It's like, how much I don't like sports at all. I mean, literally none. I never watched sports in my life. Literally could give a flying fuck about any sports. I don't even understand half of them anyways, because I've never cared. The closest I did to sports is I played wrestling, but that was just an individual thing. And I did it for 1 year, and I was also just seemed like too much damn exercising for not much gain. I got into drugs and whatever. But if you are a religious fanatic, or you're a sports fanatic, to me personally, if it doesn't affect my life, I could give a fuck. If you want to worship a tin cup, cool, whatever. It's not true, but I see it as someone be saying, well, you got to know the Knicks this or whatever, football this, and I'm like, whatever.
I'm pretty much the same way. If you want to worship the plastic bag and the religion of the plastic bag and its zipper, you go right ahead. I don't know how much it's going to help you from your day to day,
But if all of a sudden
or if you want
say
to buy
that
all
I
the
can't have
merchandise,
paper bags
sports team.
or that we can't put plastic bags, try to figure out how to get biodegradable plastic bags because you need it to be non-biodegradable because that's your religion, and you start you start to see really quick how if your thing starts to really affect our reality, that's a problem. Same with sports. If all of a sudden every time a sports wins, you go out in the area and break and burn buildings and smash people's, that's a fucking problem.
Oh yeah, it is.
Because there's people do that when their sports team wins or they lose and they're off and they're shooting guns in the air and whatever. What the fuck? That's what I'm saying. It becomes a damn problem when it really hurts society because of whatever belief you have. But it doesn't hurt me. Like, because people are like, well, you're afraid of religion or whatever. No, it doesn't hurt me if you fucking think nonsense anymore and you think sports matter. I don't care about either. And so as long as it's just some weird, like if you said you collect stamps, I don't. If it makes you happy to collect zillions of stamps, spend your whole life and dedicating to every little thing and sticking them on stuff, and cool, whatever. I mean, but so I feel like that. But all of a sudden, if all of us have to live your stamp cult, and you're telling me that somebody can't get gay married because it goes against your stamp cult, yeah, that's a fucking problem. or if you no longer have to care about homeless people because of your stamp cult, or you get what I'm saying, or women can't own property anymore because of your stamp cult or whatever. I'm saying, it's like, what? That's the kind of stuff that is a problem.
Yeah, it's like when your self-formed cult starts like creating negative effects, starts having really dire consequences for the people around you.
Yeah,
that's when it becomes a serious problem.
Right. And like I said, but I do see how even though it's not a personal problem, it is a society problem. If your answer to the meatpacking plant getting closed is to walk around it 7 times praying instead of doing something for real change, that still does affect society. And even though I wouldn't stop you from walking around and praying or thinking pray works, it is totally right for me to say that's not the fuck how you change things or you make a better society. Fuck, pray all you want, then go out and actually fucking hold someone accountable that allowed that business to die.
Yeah. I'm not gonna like stop them. I'm not gonna send police if I had that power to stop them from playing.
And the other thing too is that people, like, I've had some people say, well, the Christian religion inspired humanism. There is a thing, religious humanism, right? But you know what happened with religious humanism? It was that in a sense you don't need God, or you should try to do things on our own without requiring God, like real world thing, which then later becomes secular humanism where you don't have any gods at all. But it doesn't change the humanism part, that humanism is that people can solve people problems by people means. That we don't, ask spirits or gods or whatever, or expect prayer to be the solution. We solve things with our own means, which I think is the way to go, no matter what you believe, that we should solve stuff we can solve and that we should care. And so, yeah. But anyways, I really appreciate, doing the video with you, Dylan, as always. And I enjoyed learning stuff on Maine because I learned stuff that I didn't actually know because I had skimmed through like someone taking a bus through a city. I kind of saw stuff, but I didn't really get out and investigate the town. And I feel like I've done that more through this blog to go look more at Maine. And I learned it's older than I thought by a few thousand years. I didn't know they had any pottery. So that was a new thing. I didn't think they had any agriculture. That was a new thing. So I did learn some stuff that, and then in general, though, it just adds to my thinking that it's good to learn stuff to remove biases.
No, yeah, it definitely helps out. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think even if other people, aren't from Maine, it's still beneficial to learn about the Native Americans in Maine because it adds to your, removing your ethno-centric bubble.
Yeah, and not just that, like it shows just how connected things are, not just regionally for modern or for pre-contact. It shows like time depth, like a lot of the same trade networks, boating routes, just like interaction spheres in general. Those things go way back, thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
So it's like you're not just learning, it's like an appreciation too.
I agree.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, at least it is for me.
Well, it is for me as well. Like I said, I enjoyed it. Next time we'll be doing Texas, the video on Texas, and learning more about that. I also don't know tons about Texas. I do know that they have some of the oldest pre-Clovis stuff and Clovis stuff, and there's definitely, I do know some stuff about Texas already, but I'm looking forward to, going through and I enjoyed, getting the information, and I'll enjoy, hearing you read it and just going through it. I think it's important, like I said, for me to go through the places we live at least. The minimum we can do, which I do think we should also do a lot more. I think that people should get land back. I think that, that government shouldn't be controlling, native reservations. That was the craziest thought to me when I found out, wait a minute, I thought the native people owned their own reservation. They don't even own the reservation they live on?
Nope.
What?
And people wonder why like so many reservations are poverty stricken and the buildings are all run down. It's because there's this huge process of legal red tape. For anybody who's heard the term Kafkaesque, like this needlessly complicated maze of a legal system. That's how most reservations are run. Like everything needs to be approved by the federal government. It's like ridiculous when you stop.
It is totally ridiculous. Yeah. So and I think that to me, every state should be teaching the native people's histories in the state. The fact we do that. I mean, I know some states sort of do that. It should be universally. How the hell is that? And there should be no one in America that doesn't know there was native people that lived here like thousands of years before. Starting our history books in 1776, there was America. And then moving on from there, and also even there, not even talking about native peoples. Just we had to fight a few of them, and move around, but because they attacked us, just manifest destiny and whatever,
Yeah, it should really get into the nitty gritty details.
Yeah, because I think
when possible.
Well, because I hear things like, man, I wish I lived in England where there's stuff that's like thousands of years old. I'm like, you live in America. There is stuff that's thousands of years old. You just mean it's not European.
Yeah, and it's not built of stone. probably what they mean. But there's plenty of stuff here that's still maintained its shape, but it's made of earth and it's thousands of years old.
Well,
it's
and then
different culture with different ideals, different mindset.
But sadly, a lot of the stuff that was built and we could have looked at is not respected now. Even the stuff that is still existing is like disrespect and allowed to be put into disrepair. But then also, like, I know I used to live in Florida, and they have like this ad where they would say, "Oh, the Florida, highways are beautiful because of all the shells that they put into the highways."
Well, guess where the shells come from?
Yeah, they tell you. They literally tell you, "Yeah, we got it from the unused shell mounds that were left from the Native Americans." Like, you mean those temples? Like, what the?
You mean fuck? like those fucking burial sites? Because a lot
burial
of
sites
weren't just rubbish. They were burials placed throughout.
I mean, but how they make it sound like it's, hey, we used this stuff that wasn't being used. You're just like literally destroying. It's like going to the graveyard. Look at all these stones. We can build a house with all the stones.
Yeah, like they're treating the shell mounds as just like fucking landfills.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, look at this unused landfill. We can use this. Isn't that great? But they say it in such a positive way. And I'm like, how freaking gross is that, man? But there's like no outrage, right? Because the white people here, like I saw this one MAGA, they were saying, what do you feel about, President Trump going out and gathering and kicking out, illegals? It's like, well, actually, I'm a Christian and a white man, and I really feel that we shouldn't even have done the women's right to vote. The guy's like, what? And he's like, yeah, colored people too. And he's like, well, who do you think should vote? And he goes, well, truly, it should just be Christian white men. I'm like,
no, what the?
Wow.
Talk about our aggression into the past.
I was like,
oh my
wow,
gosh.
Holy, this is. I mean, we're battling, and so people you battle online, that have these bigoted views. Just know there's assholes out there that are literally insane and literally want to destroy any. I mean, America's never been great, but they want to make it an absolute piece of shit.
Fuck.
Like, oh my, what? Take away women's right to vote. Take away colored people's right to vote. Worse than that, not just all men can vote, because that used to be a thing. No, only Christian men. And I thought, it comes next after that. I would have asked him, well, who do you consider Christian?
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, that's a good question.
Oh,
that's a good
Mormons,
question.
probably not Jehovah's Witness. Hey, maybe not even Catholics, right? Because you're probably a Protestant,
Yeah, which branch gets the right to vote?
Right? I was like, oh
my god.
The fact that doesn't scare like everyone. I mean, that they play that on the news, and I have heard like almost no one talk about
Oh
it.
no, yeah, that should concern people. That there are
What?
actual white men out there with that mindset who go to the voting booth with enthusiasm whenever they get the chance.
I heard that, and I'm like, how is that not massive news? How do we not have
No, that
billboards and
should
people
be.
talking about that? That is insane. There are fuckers out there that literally don't want us to go back to even the founding of America, where more than white people, or at least more than just Christians, could vote. Like they want us to go back to a non-free planet, or whatever, a non-free country. Holy fucking shit.
I wonder how many of these white Christians are like constitutionalists, if they like really value what's in the Constitution.
You know what's really crazy too? He asked him like, "Well, don't you feel like that people have like he said the Constitution reminded me." He goes, "Don't you feel like people start?" He goes, "Oh, I think that men, women, different people of cultures and religions and colors should have dignity. Yeah, definitely should have. We all should have dignity." I'm like, I don't think you know what dignity means with you put that the way your beliefs. Like, what the fuck? How can you say all that shit you just said and say you believe in dignity? You can have rights, just not human rights, not the right to vote, not the right to free assembly or free ideas. No, none of that shit. Anyways, so next time we're gonna do. Next time,
no, I was gonna say something about like being burned. I was gonna say something about like, because with somebody like that, I don't want to assume, but when you're already setting the bar so low, like what would it take for them to advocate like burning people at the stake again?
I'm sure not much, especially a non-white Christian man.
Yeah, if you're already backtracking that hard.
Well, and then of course they're worried about Islam. I don't know. That sounds pretty bad, like Islam that you think is so bad, like ISIS or something, right? That's like the Christian ISIS. I mean, they're like, oh, we need to fight together against Islam. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Those white nationalists sound no different to me. Anyways, yeah. Anyways. Whatever about that crazy shit. So next time we're gonna do a mythology one on spirits as it relates to animism, totemism, shamanism, paganism, because all of it is like someone asked me one time. He said, "Well, Damien, I think that Jesus could be like a shaman, so especially under your definition." I go, I have no problem with that. And he's like, "Well, I think that a lot of things have animism." And I'm like, "Well, all religion has animism to me," because all of them have spirit beliefs. So I think it's interesting is some people I feel wrongly because they try to make it like somehow when primitive people have animism, because they're like, well, the people that believe that rocks and spirits, be rocks or trees or whatever, weather events. And I'm like, well, not all people that are animists believe all rocks or trees or whatever have spirits. so it's, and you would still call them animist, right? So it's really the universal thing is they believe in spirits, period. That life, life can have spirits. Well, part of that is that life has a spirit. So you are part of the animist to me. Anything that has a spirit belief is a branch of animist thinking to me. So that's why, like I said, I want to do the thing on spirits. And I had told you before we started this, and I'll tell everybody else. Normally we do, or I've been wanting to do, an archaeology or sort of science or whatever type of video, and then one on mythology, and then back to one on archaeology or science or whatever, and then one on mythology, back and forth. And of course, my videos, I always mix all that sort of in there too, anyways. But I'm just saying the main focus. But after we do the spirit one, we're going to do the other one for Texas, which would be kind of like my archaeology sort of one. But then after that, we're not going to do right away another one of mythology, because I want to address DNA. We're going to go through and explain, especially female DNA. I'm going to show them both how male DNA is kind of intuitive, A, B, C, D, A being the oldest, C, B, D, and kind of like everything that's a younger, as the number or the letters go down, the list, they get younger. That's not the case with females. So we're going to explain that, and then I'm going to explain like sort of regions and how things move, migrations, so that people can kind of understand, because I really feel there isn't a good explanation out there. Then after we do that, the female. I'm just going to lightly touch on the male, but mainly going to be about doing the female because the male is sort of intuitive. But one of these times we'll deal with the male stuff. But the female is not intuitive, super complex, and so I want to really address that. Then after that, I want to do sort of where I think animism or sort of religion in humans starts after we're influenced by Neanderthal. At the same time, though, about 100,000 years ago, it wasn't just we learned how to bury. It wasn't just that we started doing red ochre, which we were not doing before in human existence, which Neanderthals had been doing for almost 300,000 years or something. They've been doing different behaviors and burial, or at least human caching and stuff, and making sort of figurines and just doing like symbolic behavior way before us. Once we're taught, we start adopting Neanderthal stone tools that they were doing pre us. So we pick up burial, we pick up red ochre, we pick up, I think, some animistic thinking, and we pick up stone tool manufacturing, copying them. We mix cultures for life. It could be up to 30,000 years. Some of those people die off. Some, like there's a female DNA that goes all the way to Siberia, to almost like the Soviet cave at 100,000. Most of them don't stay there, or they go either directly back and start influencing cultures in Africa, or the rest of them just go to Africa or die off. Don't stay in a sense in Israel or whatever, or the larger Middle East, because they don't just stay in Israel. They also kind of go to Iraq and Iran. They're kind of moving around, but everybody goes back. And we'll explain at that time, I'll explain some DNA, like male DNA, because in a sense, out of Africa is D and E together as a unit. It comes back into Africa and then it splits. D then leaves and E kind of stays for the most of the time. And then E by 20,000 or 15,000 shoots up into Israel. And then another branch at 10,000 of E shoots up into Israel and goes all the way to the Balkans. And then at 5,000, E shoots up again into Israel and into the Balkans. And so I want to explain that, like, and every time it does this, different ideas, of course, are spreading. So I think this is important to understand. But also, I want to expand at this kind of stuff because BT, which is male DNA, if you read a lot of stuff, it'll say never left Africa, right? BT.
Okay.
But that's not true, since we know the Gravidan culture, which is in a sense Eastern Russia all the way to Central Europe, and then even later into Western Europe, has BT in it, showing that yes, it did leave.
Yeah. Huh.
And it went all the way. Now it dies off. It doesn't. There's no like current people today that live outside of our habit, but it did leave. So I want to address some of that stuff and show you, and show everybody really, but explain that how it relates to male DNA that people say doesn't happen, did happen.
Huh.
So it can be a little more understood. So because I think it's interesting, especially like I said, because people say if you read the stuff, it says that they never went out of Africa. And I'm like, yeah, but then we find it in cultures that are like 35,000 to 20,000 years ago that have it. In Europe, so it obviously didn't, stay in Africa. But anyways, I think it's, I really like understanding the DNA because it helps me to understand like how people move around. Just like doing the languages, you see the larger connections and movements of people. Why that's also important, because then you can move, so you can see stone tools moving, or how they're doing artifacts, or how animals like dogs are moving around, or what I'm saying, you get a larger understanding. Which is, like I said before, why I never would believe any of that Graham Hancock shit. Where's your DNA? Where's your language families? Where's your animal husbandry behaviors? Where's your artifacts? Who gives a fuck? You see a pyramid here, a pyramid here. Explain more to me than that. That's not good enough.
Yeah.
Anyways, but that's just saying so people know what we're going to be getting into. So go ahead though and tell people where they can find you and about you, and then we'll end the video.
Okay, you can find me on X, Reddit, and Blue Sky at CopperViolette. I have an academia.edu page, Dylan Violette. If you want to contact me professionally, you can do that at gmail.com, CopperViolette@gmail.com. And I also have a Facebook account. I go by Dylan Violette on there, guy in a gray hat, holding a little baby black lab.
Right on.
Yep.
And I'll I'll go ahead and put the blog that me chatting with Dylan about prehistory. I'll put the video in there and then put the blog in, either always in the comments or in the video description. And I appreciate everybody checking it out. Thank you, Dylan. Have a great day.
Yep. You too, Damien. See you next time, everybody.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity, I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.